Welcome, everyone. Dr. Anthony Criniti IV here, also known as Dr. Finance. You're on the Dr. Finance Live podcast. Thank you all for being here today. We have an amazing guest today, Steve Farrell from Humanity's team. He's co-founder with Neil Donald Walsh, doing amazing stuff, and we're going to get to know all about him today. If you want to find out more information about this interview or anything about what we're doing here, go to drfinance.info. With that said, let's get to introduce Steve Farrell. Welcome, Steve. How are you, sir?
Hey, I am great, Dr. Finance. Thanks so much for having me on your program. Really looking forward.
Absolutely, Steve. Appreciate you. An honor to have you here. So, Steve, as customary, what we usually do, we do a little 30-second snapshot. If you want to tell us about yourself in 30 seconds, just a quick condensed profile. And then we're going to get into your story. And then after that, I got about 20 questions or so for you. So with that said, can you give us tell us a little about yourself? Maybe 30 seconds or so.
I now live in Boulder, Colorado with my family. Humanity's team, this 501c3 nonprofit you mentioned, is based here, where we have reach impact all over the world. Life is good. We're all about conscious living, and I know, and that means conscious business. And I know we're going to dive into all of this in a whole lot more detail.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you. So where are you originally from, Steve? You want to tell us a little about your early years growing up?
You bet. Well, my dad was in the Navy when I was born. So I was born in Hawaii and Honolulu, and then, submarines. So we were all the ports, East Coast, West Coast, left, headed up the Peace Corps in Honduras in Tegucigalpa, and then went back to Washington, D.C., where he was leading Senator Percy's staff, who was a Republican senator from Illinois. That's where I really grew up. I went through college there, George Washington University.
Wait, sorry, we got to pause 1 second. You went to GW?
I went to GW.
Me too.
All right. Wow, there you go.
Wow. I thought you were a California guy the whole time.
Yeah, no. I grew up East Coast. All my friends, family were on the East Coast. I was the one that went west.
Wow. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. So, then I moved out to California. And of course, in my book, I tell this story. I'm going to call it an unlikely story, where you've got a kid growing up with a single mom, divorced, 6 brothers and sisters. And then 11 years later, find myself at the center of wealth creation in Silicon Valley, because I'd started 2 companies that we went to 75 million. That gave me entrance into Young Presidents Organization, where I was there with all of these people like Gavin Newsom, were in my chapter, other amazing people. And then I had my calling to leave all of it and go, as you mentioned, start Humanity's team with Neil Donald Walsh. Here I am 20 years later.
Wow. Well, that's a lot right there. So maybe we can start with the first 10 years. If you want to just give us some highlights of the first 10, 15 years, some stories, what it was like growing up with dad, who's in the Navy. I'm sure you did a lot of traveling. So if you want to tell us a little about that.
Yeah. So I was one of 7. My dad went to the Naval Academy. His dad went to the Naval Academy, et cetera, down the line. None of us are military brats. There actually are 5 sons of my dad alive today, me being one of them. We've all gone in different directions. I was not an alpha male at all. Maybe you'll certainly see that here during this program. I'd say maybe softer and gentler than alpha male, which then was unusual, because then when I got out to Silicon Valley there in Northern California, started these companies, that's an alpha male world. So I worked with the venture capital organizations to launch the second one. We raised almost $200 million to launch that second company. This is really just about the first 10 years of my life. So, but I'm just trying to give you a little color, a little texture here. I would say, middle kids, which is what I was the 3rd oldest. They're good listeners. So, you usually have the oldest and the youngest on 2 sides of the table, making a lot of racket, listen to me, blah, blah, blah. I learned to listen well. And so that then set the stage for these later years of my life, because in the first 10 years, I just was a really good listener, and to go do the things then that I was my destiny to do, I needed to listen well, yes, but I needed to also learn to lead. And from the middle of the family, you don't necessarily learn to lead. So made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot of wisdom came to me, lots of new processes. In that first 10 years, well, one of the things I would share is my grades were not great there at the beginning of high school. So a couple of things happened. One, my dad said to me, he said, Steve, you know, somebody has to put the toothpaste in the tube. And it was his way of inspiring me to, you know, so keep doing what you're doing, and you're doing great. You're on track, you know, to be that person. And that, you know, that really had an effect on me. The other thing that happened there in those early years is my parents let me hitchhike around the United States. I was just finishing my sophomore year in high school, and with a friend, we hitchhiked from Washington, D.C., there on the East Coast, out to California, I-80, all the way west. And then we went down the southern route back home, interstate highways. So down through Dallas, Texas, and these other cities that you pass through, Albuquerque, et cetera. That was another big turning point for me, because when I left my home to hitchhike out west, I had longer hair, you know, was smoking pot and stuff. And not that I'm not trying to put down smoking pot, but at a young age, you know, you've got to be really disciplined and thoughtful about kind of the world you see and where you want to go. And I had people pick me up that had no plan, no real vision, no money, et cetera. And so when I got out west, I actually cut my hair short as just part of the change that was about to occur in me when I went home from that trip. I cleaned up my room, kept it clean, immaculate. It just, I decided really on that trip, I want more in life. I want to have a vision. I want to have a plan. I want to have some discipline. You know, I want to go somewhere. I don't want to just be drifting around without any vision or any plan and no money. So that was one of the real formative events there in those early years.
Steve, just to interrupt you, and I apologize, maybe it's my generation. I don't really understand the whole concept of, and I think many people, of hitchhiking, because it's so foreign these days, and I'm kind of in between the generations. So, like, you know, my dad's generation, same thing. It was a big thing, I guess, with Route 1. What do you call it? The major highway, Route 66, getting your kicks. So was that common for people to do that at that time? You know, with the whole movement going on back in the 70s?
It was pretty common. So the 60s and early 70s, you know, out until the mid to late 1970s. Yeah, it was loose. You know, of course, the 60s is talked about tie-dye T-shirts and drugs and anything goes. But honestly, this extended into the early and mid 70s as well. In my neighborhood, as I mentioned, I grew up with a single divorced mom. People that were married were sleeping around. Divorce was quite common. Parents were smoking pot and doing other things. It was a pretty loose atmosphere. And then regarding hitchhiking, you know, there wasn't, Washington, D.C. area is government workers. So you don't have a whole lot of money there. It's a good solid middle class, you know. It's not that people are going without clothes or homeless or anything, but it's very middle class, where you're on a moderate budget, and especially so if your parents are divorced. So that meant that there was one car. My mother had that car. She would drive to work. She worked full time. Hard to believe you could raise 7 kids and have your single parent working full time, but this is the way it worked. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't alone. There were others hitchhiking all over the place in these years. I'd get to work that way, sometimes even to school that way. And so when I said with my friend Eric, hey, let's go out to California and kind of see the country over the summer, we'll hitchhike. You know, no big deal. We'd been hitchhiking for a long time.
And like, you know, nowadays, if someone was hitchhiking on the side of the road, they'd probably have such a ridiculous batting average. It'd be shameful. I mean, just seeing them on there, I'd say out of maybe 100,000 people, maybe 5 would pick them up. It's because the stigma that there's someone who's going to pick you up is going to, you know, take you and kidnap you or something like that. Like, they didn't think about that stuff or didn't care.
Yeah, you know, it really was a different day and age. And you're right. Today, very few. I rarely see hitchhikers. Rarely, very rarely. So today, you know, it shows you how economically how far we've come. You know, almost everybody's got money for at least a bus. You know, or
Yeah.
or or something to get around. It wasn't like then when there really wasn't the economics in place to get, if you had a job at a gas station, drugstore, janitor, which I had all of those jobs and more. That's how I would get to work and back, head over to my girlfriend's place. I did incidentally get my first car right when I got back from that trip. And the way I got the car is my mother and one of her friends, a guy named Andy, who was a legal secretary with my mother, came to me and said, Steve, if you promise that you're never going to smoke pot again, we will buy you your first car. It was a Corvair. It costed $55. And now you're going to have to pay us back $5 a month. But you have to promise that you will never smoke pot again, and in which case we'll buy that car and you'll pay us back. And I went away and thought about it. And again, because of the trip that I'd just taken and decisions that I'd made, it wasn't a tough decision for me. I said, hey, that's fine. Because for me, I'd kind of go into this place of maybe lower energy, sometimes even a little paranoid. And, people react differently to smoking pot. That was my particular reaction. So I said, yeah, that works, good, we'll make the agreement. And so then I got my Corvair, the little, it had that little broom, like vacuum cleaner.
Oh yeah.
It's like a 1-inch thing, up is drive, down is reverse. It was a little white Corvair. And of course, Ralph, what was Ralph's last name? Consumer Advocate said, boy, the Corvair was a death trap. You go over a little hill and they just turn right over. Right? So fortunately, I didn't have that happen to me. But so then I had transportation, then it changed, made things a little easier. But today is so different. One of the things that Warren Buffett shares, which is true, is that we all grew up like kings and queens. The luxury that is available to our middle class in terms of being able to fly and all of these, automobile, transportation, iPhone, et cetera. It's just, you compare it to back hundreds of years ago, even people that were in the wealthiest class couldn't do the things that a middle income person can do today. So we have incredible wealth. We don't see it that way. The way we operate as a civilization today is all sort of context of, well, my neighbor has this and I don't have it yet, and things like that, at least in the conventional world, not so much in conscious living, but in the conventional world, it's all sort of comparison. And you don't think in terms of I'm a king or queen compared to 300 years ago, where you'd only have a Carnegie, with some of the kinds of things that I have access to.
Yeah, I mean, just take it one step further. A very simple analogy. We take in our kitchen for granted a little section called the spice drawer, but kings and queens 500 years ago, they were going around the world to just capture these spices, right? They were sending Portuguese and Spanish fleet around the world to get a keg of nutmeg and transport it back. Now it's like $1 at the 99 cents, $1 at the dollar store, and here we have sitting right in our kitchen. We take it for granted, but that's only available for kings and queens 400 or 500 years ago or more.
Yeah, so there's the perfect example. Exactly, that was multi-thousand mile journey to get spices and silk and some of these things, which you can go into Nordstrom Rack and something with silk. You can go into a dollar store and grab these spices. This is a perfect example. The wealthy would send people for a years-long trip,
yeah,
with these spices and certain garments and things
that risk their life too. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Steve. Appreciate you. So when you were growing up, you said you had a variety of different jobs. I'm just trying to get to how you became an entrepreneur, getting the baseline for that. So you had all kinds of stuff. You were a busboy. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I had every job in the world, except, interestingly, I never figured out that I should work in a restaurant as a busboy, and then of course as a waiter, where you make really great money with tips and things. But I've had every other job that you name them. So gas station, drugstore, grocery store, janitor. I was a telemarketer. I worked at UPS with the earreg package delivery. So yeah, I worked my way through college. I went to, we were talking about GW. I went to, I'll tell you a story about that. So I lived at home because GW is pretty expensive, and I was putting myself through school. We didn't have money for school. I did get some grants and things from GW, but I put myself through. So I worked full time and I went to school full time for 4 years. I got through and graduated in 4 years, but I was an evening manager for a grocery store there in the Washington, D.C. area I had the 4 to 11 p.m. shift. And so what I would do is I go through my classes there earlier in the day, and then I would there wasn't any one office where I'd change clothes, but there were buildings where faculty, and I just walked down the faculty hall looking for an office that looked like it was dark and maybe nobody was going to walk in. And I'd have my change of clothes. I'd had a white shirt, blue pants that were part of my evening manager outfit. I'd go in, close the door, change clothes, come right back out. I do it, in 2 minutes. And then I'd drive off to the grocery store, and I'd work the 4 to 11 shift. Then I'd come home, and then I'd work till pretty late at night with homework and stuff there at the little kitchen nook that we had in our home. And then I'd repeat the next day. And that was my life for 4 years. I actually never went to a single party at George Washington, no social event.
Wow.
But you don't need to feel sorry for me, because in high school, especially before that, before I did that hitchhiking trip, man, I was doing everything. And I went to all of the parties and did all of the fun stuff. So I didn't, when I got to college, it was really all about learning and graduating.
It's a very interesting scenario. Yeah, GW is one of the best schools in the country, but it also has a wild party side to it. I think they ranked one of the top party schools at the time I was going there in the country as well. So that just shows your dedication to be working multiple jobs and have the difficulties of an extremely challenging university. So you must have been goal focused, goal oriented, and just very serious about accomplishing all that.
When I was in high school, another couple of stories here. There was my guidance counselor was Dr. Jacoby was his name, and back then they would give you these tests for intelligence. At least that's what they called them. And I said to Mr. Jacoby, I said, "Hey, how did I score?" And he said, "Well, we can't ever share the results of these, but you were just average. You were just average." And that really caused me, especially divorced mom, all these brothers and sisters living in a small home, to say, man, I gotta really go for it. I need to be driven here if I'm gonna one day have a family and have a normal life with vacations and a home, etc. So I was very focused. You could even call it, for parts of my life, over focused. And when we get to sort of later tenure chapters, I can tell you where I healed that, healed it to a great extent. The other story, just that brings in the whole thought process around how I was going to live my life and be disciplined. When I was in the 6th grade, so we're really backing up here, I needed braces, and my parents couldn't afford braces. So my mother found an orthodontist that, again, would take a payment plan. He said, "Okay, your braces are going to cost X, and for $10 a month, if you pay me back, it'll work fine." So I was 11 years old, and I had a payment plan for my braces. And I didn't, none of this, looking back, was challenging or some hardship for me or anything. And it was actually quite the contrary. As I look at this in today's world, and I've got 2 young adults that Stephanie and I are raising now, entitlement is the biggest problem and challenge. And you want to actually throw these things at kids, throw them in the deep end, of course, be there and support them and inspire them and all of that. But where, it's way too easy to give too much to your kids and be afraid to really challenge them and make them earn their way into the kind of lifestyle that they want.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind stepping back for a moment, Stephen, you don't have to answer this question, but I think it might explain some things. Is at any point when your parents got divorced, what impact do you think that had on your trajectory, making you want to go and hitchhike and do all these things? Did that play any role in any of these goals that you had, the conclusion that you realized where you're like, okay, I have to be better than what the hand I'm dealt right now, and this is what I have to do? Because I know you must have worked really hard, because I went through GW and I had some side jobs, but to take it to the level that you went, you were for 4 years. That's dedication. So there must have been something, and it's a young age still. It's relatively young, between 18 and 22. There must have been something before that was just pushing you like a rocket ship.
Yeah, well, so here's the thing, and this is, I really go contrary to what most people would share, where you've got a situation like this, my parents getting divorced, and I'm in the 6th grade. And again, there were 7 of us, 7 siblings at this time, my father moving out, moving in with his new wife, and then my mother raising us. So for me, it was kind of a dream. I mean, it really, I liked it. It worked well for me. The reason is manyfold. One, there was some fighting going on between my mother and father, and I just, being around that energy was not making me happy at all. Secondly, I was, you can kind of get this from hitchhiking around the country. I really had an adventurous spirit, and so where my mother then was working full time, and man, that's talking about a get out of jail card. I mean, I could go do anything I wanted to do. I was dating all over the place. And I remember several times I'd go to school, and then a friend would say, "Hey, it's Friday. If you want, come on, ride the bus with me home. We'll hang out this weekend, and then we'll go to school Monday, and then you can go back home." And I'd do that, and I'd forget to call my mother. I mean, and then I'm gone for, she has no idea what happened to Steve. I'm gone for 4 days. I go off to bluegrass festivals. I mean, I just had this adventuresome spirit. And where there was just one mom that was so busy and tied up in things, man, the world was my oyster. I was socially, and at school, my brother was the president of the high school. I was the treasurer of the high school. So, and then the woman that was the secretary had the same last name, Farrell. And then the treasurer, or I was the treasurer of the vice president, her last name was Farmer. So it was Farrell, Farmer, and Farrell that were running the school. So, and it was a big secondary school. There were 6,500 kids. So people knew who we were walking around school. So it was a cool thing for me. Now, I will tell you, especially my sisters would share, it wasn't a cool thing. And they felt there was a lot of things missing where they had a single parent, and they'll even today look back to that time and say, wow, that wasn't very cool. I wish it had been different. But for me personally, it really worked.
That is an interesting take on that. So it was to your advantage, and it ties into the whole saying a lot of self-development speakers say it happened for you, not to you, right? So it was happening to build your character and make you who you are, and you wouldn't have had the ability to go out there and learn all those lessons from hitchhiking, exploring the world, if possibly, I mean, we don't know, but possibly if that didn't happen.
Yeah, no, it definitely, what doesn't break you builds you. We've heard this so many times, certainly true for me. And man, I'll tell you, I needed all of this and more. When we talk later about Silicon Valley, but where I'm in nosebleed growth, we're just growing like crazy. And then I'm raising hundreds of millions of dollars. I needed every bit of wisdom and experience that I could get my hands on. And certainly I drew on that from those early years and other experiences that I picked up later.
Thank you, Steve. So we're going to advance forward around the GW time. So you graduate, I'm assuming you did it in 4 years, around 22 years old, probably. You graduated, and what did you do next?
So then I got my first job out of college, and it's a terrible job. It was so through one of my father's contacts that lived out in California, actually in the San Francisco Bay Area, I got this job working for a financial services company that was in collateral management, and I never interviewed in person for this job. I interviewed virtually. So and my job was inside auditor source document control trainee. So, and my salary was $12,200 a year, and my bosses.
Was that a lot back in the day? I mean, relative to today?
That would, wasn't a lot. I mean, even today, I'm going to guess, that'd be around 30,000 if I had to just take a wild guess, but it wasn't some great job for the kind of education that I had, but it was the job that was available. And candidly, I'd felt a calling to move west. So, and that's going to be a common thread here as we talk about my life, that, there's this so-called still small voice that's there. And if you listen to it and resist what family and friends and coworkers are telling you, you've listened to that still small voice, boy, it's going to take you places. And I did. It said, move out west. I didn't know anybody out west. So that was a tough move. But so coming back to that job, I showed up for the job and my bosses said, well, so what kind of experience do you have in finance? In business and accounting, et cetera. And I said, well, I never did take a business course and I haven't taken any accounting. And they were horrified. I was like, well, you're my one rec that I just filled. And we need an inside source document, an inside auditor basically is what it is. And I'd never taken a business or accounting course. So I had to immediately enroll in accounting courses there. San Francisco State there out in San Francisco. They didn't fire me, fortunately. And the interesting thing about this job is, well, one, accounting is not that tough to learn at all. And it's valuable to understand the P&L, a balance sheet, and understand the mechanics of these and where people can squirrel away, where things aren't what they seem, and there's a lot of common sense, just as there is with anything in business and auditing. There's a lot of common sense of once you kind of go into an organization, look around, if they're pledging accounts receivable or inventory, or sometimes it was documents, you could kind of get a quick measure of what it should be and anything that might go wrong. And when it did go wrong, why it went wrong. So I had a business head, I would call it. And so I quickly picked it up, and then they quickly moved me to their biggest projects where there was an exposure, and they might have to go to insurance to cover multi-million-dollar loss or something. They put me on those projects, and they advanced me quickly. Within 4 years, I went from inside auditor trainee to regional vice president, responsible for the whole Western U.S. for the company, So, wow, I mean, what a ride in 4 years. And then I left that first job for IBM. That was in the 80s. IBM in the 1980s was really the cool place to be. This book, In Search of Excellence, came out then. And everybody wanted to work for IBM. I did too. And, because of that climbing up the ladder on the financial services side, IBM hired me for mainframe sales, which I didn't know anything about selling or, mainframes or anything. IBM had an incredible training program down in Irving, Texas. So they shipped me off to Irving, Texas, and I started all over. It was just like, went from inside auditor trainee to regional vice president. Now I'm back down at the very beginning. Now I'm a sales trainee, with IBM. But the other sales trainees, one was an MBA right out of Stanford, and the other one was University of Pennsylvania. So, I mean, they were hiring the best and the brightest, and they said, well, we'll take a chance on this kid. He did, he doesn't have an MBA, but he seems to have a head on his shoulders. And so then I started back down at the bottom, and same thing, with IBM, I did climb, I ended up with the Pacific Stock Exchange. We were not big with the stock exchange, a company called Tandem Computer that makes fault-tolerant systems. Fault-tolerant means two engines running side by side, so it can't ever go down. With a stock exchange, you can't ever have it go down. It has to be up, available 100% of the time. IBM was not in that market. We worked with an OEM called Stratus Computer from the East Coast to fill niches like that. And I partnered with Stratus, and I went into the stock exchange, and I won. I beat Tandem, and wow, IBM was then heralding me all over the place for what I'd done. And then that was when I I learned about this term entrepreneur. And as I looked at the profile of entrepreneur, I said, my God, that's me. I'm an entrepreneur, I need to go out and start something. So then I spent a couple of years looking at all these different things that I might do before I settled on the thing that I was going to do. And banded, I landed myself in the right spot when I jumped from IBM to start this.
How long did you work at IBM for?
I worked there for 6 years. Yeah,
And-
from 84 until 89, 90, January 1st, 1990 was where I started my new job with, another, start rags to riches thing. I left with this other guy that I'd worked with that was one of my key guys at the financial services company. And he had gone in the direction of really learning the deep engineering of digital communications. And I'd gone into learning the deep sales and marketing and business of digital communications at IBM. So we were a good complementary pair, and we started a digital communications company there. Right as the internet, if you had to put a date on it, they say 1992. We were January 1990, so we were right there on that wave, as this massive wave is coming in. That's the internet. That's digital communications, and what we did is we went to the biggest companies on the West Coast initially. We then went to the East Coast later, but we'd help them like the Gap and Esprit, even Apple Computer, AAA of California, and many other big accounts. And we designed their digital networks for their global communications, not only their campuses, but their global communications that require these routers and bridges and switches and all these technologies that supported high performance, highly secure networks. And, as you can imagine, man, that business was just on fire back then. There was not enough expertise around. And my partner, Rich, and I knew this much more, only a little, not much more, but a little more than everybody else. And so even IBM, my former employer, picked us up as their sub and started dropping us these big accounts to help them out, and help their customers grow.
And I just want to pause on that. So when you left IBM, how old were you at that time?
So when I left IBM, let's see, 1990, 92. So I was 32. Yeah, 32.
You're still relatively young. You got a whole bunch of energy, and now you're starting your business. This was the first time you actually became a full-blown entrepreneur, right? You 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was it. Yeah. Used furniture, the cheapest executive suite we could find. We even went down to South San Francisco, which at the time was just kind of the poor boy there, in Silicon Valley. So we get the cheapest suite, the cheapest used furniture, and 2 guys, and that's how we started.
And just to put it all in perspective, many people may not know the power behind IBM. So you just gained 6 years of intense knowledge working for what I believe at that point in time was probably the largest technology company in the world. They were the kings and queens they were royalty at that time, right?
They
IBM.
were indeed. Yeah, boy, this book, In Search of Excellence, I don't know if young people today are aware of it, but that was the book that just was on everybody's bedstand. And everybody IBM was attracting the best and the brightest. They had them from all, Harvard, all the top universities. They could hire anybody they wanted. Everybody wanted to work there. And you'd go into a meeting and you'd sit in a meeting on a round table, and the level of communications and creativity and problem solving by young people was extraordinary. It was like, wow, you don't walk in rooms too often that have that kind of brain power around a table. IBM was able to hire that kind of crowd. So it was a pretty cool place to work.
How did they wind up, just curious, how did they wind up losing their steam over the years? I know the internet, Microsoft, Bill Gates came in and that empire began, but like what really, they're not downfall, but just like not the top anymore. What happened?
So it was, it's this whole technology cycle that brought them down. It's even is playing out today. Now it's AI that is the big hill that companies are climbing. We'll see who gets to the top of the hill. Right now, it seems like it's NVIDIA and Microsoft in the pole position here. But so then it was the mainframe, that was the dominant thing in technology, and you could sell mainframes with unbelievable margin. I don't know what it cost IBM to build these things and make them, but we'd sell them, I'm sure, at 6, 7, 8 times cost, just unbelievable margins. And then the PC came along there in the 80s, the Mac, Steve Jobs there, right near where I was living, starting Apple, getting that thing off the ground. We came out with our own PC, and then the PC Junior and all of these things. And of course, now you still have that whole clone market, but that put huge pressure on margins. Just to give you an example, so there were on these mainframes, you'd hang disk off of them, just as you like. Right now, we call it RAM. Where we put memory on our PC, right? And you buy a gigabit of RAM for $40. Okay. Now, I was selling back then in the 80s. You'd have a head of string, which was your disk that you stored documents on. Then you'd have the non-head of string that would sort of sit behind the head of string that didn't have as much intelligence. My head of string would be like 860 megabytes, not even a gig. And it was about $200,000. And then the ones that sat on the string behind the head of string with less intelligence were about $150,000 for the same thing, where I've got buying in the megabyte of a disk, not even a gig. So, I mean, just this extraordinary flattening out of the cost structure and margin on this technology. That's really what brought down IBM, Hewlett Packard, all of the big players in mainframes back then.
And this ties into our earlier discussion about spices and all that stuff. Like, the technology, it may look the same in some ways, but it's not. Like, we got all this extra memory, this extra knowledge, information at reduced costs. And then if you just look at the size of the capacity of the storage alone, I mean, a gig, now you can get a 1 terabyte for like $100. 4 terabytes, actually. I think they're like 4 up to 6 terabytes for like $100, a storage unit that you could plug into your USB of your computer. I mean, what would that cost, Steve? I'd love to hear your opinion. How much would 100 gigs cost in, let's say,
oh my God,
that time?
Unbelievable. If you work that math, just say, you've got anywhere 200 meg to 800 meg there on those DASD disks. We call them DASD disk strings, and 200 to 200,000 down to 140,000. I mean, you're just in the tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds. Likewise, printing too. Our laser printers. We had a new software that put out common architecture across laser printers, and our 20-page a minute printer was $40,000. 20 page a minute. And I remember my customer standing up one time. The plant actually is here in Boulder. That's how I knew Boulder, as I flew out here back then. And I had my customer stand up and say, he said, man, this thing, I can't understand why I can't buy this thing for, 15,000 or 17,000, why it's priced all the way up here. And we thought he was crazy, because back then that was state of the art, where we're selling these laser printers with that kind of performance at that price.
Wow. With that trend, let's take $100 let's just say 4 terabyte storage. And like you said, probably I would bet probably hundreds of millions back in the day, right? For that same $100 of value today, right? So in 30 years, if you project this out 100 years from now, like, there's a rumor that I've always heard, being a former finance professor, a lot of people always think that eventually things will end up at free, like the whole world, everything will be free because costs are getting down. We're able to do everything. Technology is advancing. Will there be a point in civilization at some point? It could be 100 years from now. It could be 1,000,000 years from now, where everything is free. I mean, what do you think about that crazy concept?
I don't so much think in that direction. What I think is that where you've got this whole now where we're bumping up against, as we grow GDP, we're bumping up against global warming and extreme weather, that we could end up where it's more of a sharing, that like we own a lot of things that you use for a very small percentage of the time. And it could become an environment where if you're only using something for 2 hours a week, you don't necessarily own it 100%. So it could more go in that direction.
Yeah, that's an interesting philosophy. Well, thank you, Steve. Appreciate you. And back to your story. Sorry for the digression, but I think this is important because to understand the accomplishments that you eventually produced in Silicon Valley, I think people have to understand the industry that you evolved from and you learned a lot from. So with that said, after IBM, you created this company. How long did that go on for, and what was the end result of that?
So yeah, that company was called Enterprise Networking Systems, or ENS for short, and that was the one we started January 1st, 1990. And just really, again, wow. I mean, Silicon Valley, we're the first ones to set up shop, creating architectures for high-performing, highly secure global networks. So, I mean, imagine, talking about being in the right place at the right time. So we went through nosebleed growth. We started out, incidentally, again, two guys. So we had a plan. Neither one of us had any money, so that you could use the metaphor of sort of guys walking on the high wire, but no net. So if we tripped, I pulled out my IRA, cashed out my IRA. I didn't have that much leaving IBM, because IBM actually doesn't pay huge incomes. That's not why you go to work there. So with what little money I had, I realized I was going to have to start over. It was going to be very unpleasant if I felt, no net under me, so to speak. So we had a little plan that said we needed 200,000 in sales by 6 months in, and we were at 182,000 at 6 months in. But we were close enough to where we said, okay, we're gonna stay on this. We're not going to fold. And sure enough, within 2 or 3 weeks, we went over the 200,000, and then we'd set $1 million in the first year, and we went pretty. I think it was $1.3 million or $1.4 million we did in the first year. So we were off and running, and then became huge challenges, because entrepreneuring is about hiring people better than you in every function of the organization. So better salespeople, better engineers, better operational people, better accounting people, and you've got to be a leader that feels that somebody that people can gather around and feel good about, want to be a part of the organization because of who you are, your energy, your thought process, your creativity, your problem solving. And again, that middle kid, I had a lot to learn. I were making mistakes everywhere as I was going through that process, but we did move through it pretty well. We got to 75 million in sales in 10 years from that 0 point, and we had about 177 or something employees at that point.
175 million per year.
Yeah, 75 million in sales per year, right? So we grew it on cash flow pretty much. Didn't even bank, carry much of a line of credit at the bank, because we didn't want to have the bank be able to shut us down. So Rich and I drew very modest salaries. We were paying the big bucks to our sales and engineers. They were 200,000-300,000, sometimes over 300,000 a year. We were in the, took us a while even to get to 6 figures, and then pay ourselves maybe 120 or 150, something like that. Because we were leaving the cash in as we were growing so fast. The constraint, as we know as entrepreneurs, is cash flow. Can you cash flow it? And so you're either going to get investors or the bank or something. We decided to do it ourselves, which is how I was able to leave. And when we talk later about the work I'm doing, we had enough prosperity we created from cash flowing it and drawing modest salaries. So and in that time frame, there were a lot of real challenging moments where the whole thing could come down. One of them was my partner decided he wanted to sell out, early in the process to me, because of the the risks that we were taking. And he just said, let me, we're big enough and we've made enough. Let me just kind of take my 50% and go home. And we couldn't agree on a price. So we hung in there until we did sell it later at 10 years out. And there's naturally going to be some tension when you have something like that happen, where the person that's hanging on is really because he's hanging on to get the price he wants. And then we hired in very senior level people that didn't work out, didn't really have the beat on recruiting that we needed. It took a while to really get that together. Those were just a few of the challenges we encountered. Let me bring in one of the stories I said I would bring in earlier when we were talking of getting priority in life. So yeah, early, before we got to this point, I got a call from my sister. By the way, this is all in this book that I just wrote called A New Universal Dream. But all of these stories in this growth process, it was actually written for the reader to help people like me that grow up, just trying to, that have this destiny that they're drawn to, and they don't really know quite how to do it. So I kind of lay out all of the problems and challenges throughout my book. And this is how, these are the processes, wisdom that came to me to support my decision-making. But so what happened is I got a call from my sister. She was the one right at the middle of the family, the one just after me in age, Maureen. And she called and said, hey, I'm getting married. Would you come to my wedding? It was in the spring there. She's going to get married in the summer. And I said, oh, well, Maureen, I work a lot of weekends, so I'm not 100% sure I could come. Just bang me on the head, but yeah, let me definitely, thanks for calling, and I'm going to look into it and see, I clearly lost my way here saying something like that to my sister, who's getting married. And I had a dream that night. So we probably all had some number of dreams we can remember to this day, something that was so astounding or scary that it woke you up, and that it was just, again, you'd remember it to today because it was so real. Well, I had one of those dreams that night, and the dream was that Maureen died. And it was real, very real. She died, and that was why the next morning, then I called her and she picked up the phone. I was like, my heart started beating normal again because she picked up the phone. And I said, Maureen, man, I wouldn't miss your wedding, for anything in the whole world. I'm there and can't wait. And then a few months later, she got married. And, of course, the incredible celebration, all the pictures. And then a few months later, got that call, that I never wanted to get, that she died. So that had...
She did die?
She did die, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, it happened, what, a few weeks after?
A few months, yeah. It was like 3 or 4 months after her wedding that she died.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry.
Car accident, and her husband was asleep in the back seat. She was not seatbelted, driving, fell asleep, and flipped the car, broke her neck. So that, as you might imagine, had unbelievable, that was one of the turning points there in my life, where I was like, there was a lot to think about, as you can imagine, in something like that. Of wow, in a sense I was saved, that I had the dream, and then how did I even have the dream? What is this all about? There was a lot to think out and to consider, but it did change my life in terms of what's important to me and what is going to be priority to me, and informed some of these later growth stages here as I'm growing with these companies and trying to live a full life at the same time.
Wow. That is you hit me with a left hook there. I wasn't expecting that. That's a very intense story, Steve. So what was the lesson there? It was like you reacted perfect. You listened to that dream, and did you sell your business around that time?
No, I kept on. In fact, and then I started a second company that we grew to 75 million in 2 years. But what that did is, one, it really helped to give me the sense of priority of, life is not about just the top line and bottom line and career development, for God's sakes. Life is much more precious than that. And we've got to really be clear about what are the things that bring us meaning and purpose that are not our career, and to really give those things proper priority in our lives. So that was one. The other is, as I've now gone in this direction, we call it conscious living, or you could even, with a heavy spiritual component. And some of that came in there, where I realized, boy, the God of my understanding really came in here. I mean, talking about giving me a parachute, and saving me. I mean, that really happened here. I was looked out for in an extraordinary way. So it brought me closer to this whole God of my understanding, which is not a church-based thing. It's more of a spiritual thing.
Wow. So getting back to your company, there's common ways to value companies. One is the PE method, basically, and the average for that is like 10 times the earnings. So if you were earning 75 million, that company, according to this theory, would have been worth about 750 million total net worth. And then you created a second one with that. So basically, your combination of those two companies were about $1.5 million combined in value that you created. I mean, that's a huge goal for many, just to even make $1 million, let alone over $1 billion in net worth. So that's amazing. Kudos.
Yeah, no, we were, boy, when I say center of wealth creation, I mean, I really mean it. I was, then we started the second company, which was consulting only, and grew it to 75 million in revenue in 2 years. And that gave me entrance to something called the Young Presidents Organization, where then, Gavin Newsom, who's the governor there in California, was in my chapter, and Reed Hastings hadn't yet started Netflix. He was in the chapter next to us. He was working with charter schools, and people like that, was who I surrounded myself with. So, I mean, talk about an adventure where I go from the home that I described to janitor and gas station, all this. And then I'm here, with hanging out with these kinds of people. So it was quite a ride there. Yeah, amazing.
That's amazing. What was your final point where you just decided to move past that and sell it?
So I, this whole I'll call it personal awakening thing happened to me there in the 90s, where I just really got in touch with what were then more mystical teachings there in the mid 90s. Now you've got science coming in, like the quantum physics Nobel Prize that was awarded October of last year was for what was called entanglement. And if you look up entanglement means that you've got two sides of the universe with no physical connection at all that are deeply affecting each other. So which is bringing in some of what the mystics shared, that there's this one energy, the universal consciousness, that animates all of and pervades all of life. That's essentially what the mystics back, even Plato and Hippocrates and in 450 BCE, 2,500 years ago, were saying is there's no plural in consciousness, which some people, it takes a while to get your head around that, where what it means is that we're all actually a part of the, you got 8 billion faces on this planet of that one consciousness that pervades and animates all of life. So I really deeply started understanding that and getting myself educated and even living into it. And that was what then drew me to sell those companies, leave YPO, leave Silicon Valley, move to Boulder, Colorado. It was about 2 years between the time that I sold everything and I launched this nonprofit that when you introduced me, Humanities Team, I launched that with Neil Donald Walsh. Of course, he's the author of the Conversations with God book series. We launched it almost exactly 20 years ago now. And but I was there for 2 years, just kind of on the sideline, trying to decide what I was going to do next. I was called to sell it and leave it, just conventional business. I'll just say one other thing about that chapter in conventional business. I was not, even then, I wasn't some greedy entrepreneur. I mentioned I wasn't paying myself that much. We adopted the local South San Francisco high school that really needed resources and help. We'd come in and we were totally pro bono, giving them services and products and routers and switches and stuff to help their high school. We were a good-hearted organization, and it's how we were able to hire these unbelievable salespeople and engineers and senior leaders and not lose them, really retain them, was because we created a real nice culture. But the two things that happened there in the 90s is, one, I came into this understanding that is a very different understanding than most of us grow up with, where we're offspring of the one that goes by many names. The scientists say universe and cosmos, and the mystics and spiritualists say the divine, and then others call it love or life. It doesn't really matter what you want to call that one, but it is one presence permeating and animating the entire universe. That brings you into a whole new self-identification, or it did for me, So I came into a whole new awareness and understanding of who I was, and therefore how I might live my life. That was one thing. The other thing that was huge for me was, even then in the 1990s, there are huge challenges on this planet right now. Extreme weather getting worse. We've now got the war in Ukraine that has many possibilities that could also get worse. A polarity that's here, where you've got people on different sides, red state and blue state, guns, all kinds of things. And I just thought to myself that there has to be a way that we can create a sustainable and flourishing world, without all of this polarity, and without really soiling our planet so bad that kids and future generations might not have a good, strong planet to live on. And so those two things converged for me I'll call it need, to help create a healthier planet. And then self-identification, where I start identifying more as offspring of the one, which means, we've probably all heard the Rumi quote that we're not just we're not just a drop of the ocean, we're the whole ocean in a drop. So that's, if you
I like that.
If you follow the whole mystical teachings, and again, even science now is coming in quite strong on this, affirming this, that they're saying it's funny, scientists walk around like preachers now. Some of the scientists I work with, because we create educational programs, and they sound like a preacher. They say, one of them says, so what this means is that, you ought to be walking tall. You ought to have good posture. You ought to feel so unbelievably empowered. Why? Because you're inseparable from the universe. The universe can't exist without you. Do you know that? Are you living from that place? You may sound like a Sunday preacher, and it's a scientist that's talking. And that is where I come from, from that perspective. And the whole ocean in a drop, which means that we've got these different levels of consciousness. And as we live from super consciousness or supra consciousness, then we actually are the whole ocean in a drop.
And just taking it to a scientific level, there's a lot of analysis and scientific research. If you look in one drop of water, the amount of living things that are in there and the ecosystem in that one drop, that's a sort of a metaphor to what you're saying. It's a very good comparison, because in reality, one drop of water, that little shape that seems to be around the same shape, no matter what drop it's separated, there's always some deep contents in there. So that's I love that quote. Thank you, Steve. Steve, just before we get into the humanities team thing, maybe if you want to share, and you don't have to on this, but if you want to share your religious background, were you a religious person before you got into this? Agnostic, atheist? What was the foundation to go into this spiritual realm? Because you do tie into a lot of that at some point.
Yeah, and again, there's no question you could ask me that would make me uncomfortable, believe it or not. So you can actually ask me anything. So I grew up probably like a lot of people, Catholic Church was our faith, the tradition there growing up. So, and I was even an altar boy, so on Sundays and weddings and things and funerals, I'd go in and I'd be an altar boy for my local Catholic church. Now, I must say, though, that, from an early age, I did have a different sense about this God of my understanding, that this whole judgment and condemning if you go the wrong way. And I mean, I never felt that on a personal level. I always felt something that was just the opposite of this guiding hand, this supportiveness, this deity that was providing all, trying to guide all, support all. Later, when this Marine thing happened, I went to that of like, wow, did you save me or what? What I'd known in my reality became true. Of I was in this moment of my life where there was something so huge and so important. Bam, I have a miracle drop in. So there was a contrast between the faith tradition I grew up with and the Father Cowie, there, who led the local Catholic Church and those practices. And he'd kind of shake me down after weddings of, hey, the church could use those tips. If you got, what did you get, a 10, a 15, a 20, if you donated to the church, we'd be grateful. So that was a different atmosphere, a different feeling than this feeling or atmosphere of the spirituality that I'd felt my whole life, which was really quite different than what the Catholic Church was teaching. Today, with Pope Francis, boy, Catholic Church has come a long way. It's amazing, really, with Pope Francis, what all the great things that the church is doing.
What would you consider your official religion today? Are you more just spiritual, would you say?
Yeah, I would say I'm more spiritual. I love, I have friends that are Jews, Muslims, certainly Christians, Buddhists, a lot of Buddhist friends, these other traditions from Hindu, from the East. So I love them all. To me, it's just a big blending, of just really who are we really, and how are we designed, and how are we going to live our life? I mean, it really comes back to those tangible, practical things, as opposed to a lot of esoteric stuff that doesn't mean anything.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve, you can come full circle with your story, where you're living at today, and anything else you'd like to add to bring us to present.
Yeah. So, well, let me share then. We left off there in the early 90s. Incidentally, I sold my last company September 10th, 2001. And yes, September 11th was the next day. So I signed the papers on that second company.
Wow.
The day before. So another, my life is full of these, I'll call them miracles. There was another one where, because I woke up the next morning, I was down in Big Sur. I'd stayed down there with my wife, and we wake up and, the World Trade Centers are gone. So like, wow. I mean, if I hadn't signed the paperwork the 10th, I'm not sure I'd necessarily be doing what I'm doing today, but I signed the paperwork one day before. And then here I am. So then what happened, again, if we go back to your introduction to me, where Neil Donald Walsh, most people have probably heard of Conversations with God. There are 9 books there. So he, in one of his books called Tomorrow's God, you'll read about, a nonprofit being formed. It's called Humanities Team. And it's kind of surreal, because you've got, if you believe the books that it's a conversation with God, then Neil and God are talking about Humanities Team, starting it, launching it, what it's going to do in the world. And that's the organization I've been leading for 20 years. And interestingly, we're doing exactly what it says we do, back when the book came out. And, essentially what it's teaching is, let's go to Albert Einstein, has all of these incredibly famous quotes, right? So one of them is, in fact, let me read you a couple of quick quotes. So one is that the biggest illusion in the world is the illusion of separation. So that's, again, where I was talking about, the mystics said there's only a singular consciousness, and we're all faces of that consciousness. I said Plato and Hippocrates in 450 BCE were saying this. And so here you've got Albert Einstein entering him in, and he's saying the greatest illusion in the whole world is the illusion of separation. Then here's another quote that really puts his finger on it. I'm going to read it. It's a short quote because this is exactly what Humanity's Team is focused on. So his quote is, a human being is a part of a whole called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. So that's his quote. That's a 75-year-old quote.
That's Albert Einstein?
That's Albert Einstein.
Which book is it?
Well, this is just, you can Google these quotes. I think he said these rather broadly, so they're all over. If you go Google human being as part of us, a whole called by us universe, you'll see that quote. You'll also see the other quote of the biggest illusion in the whole world is the illusion of separation. And then here's another very short quote. No problem can be solved at the same level of consciousness that created it. You got to get your head around that a little bit. That no problem can be solved at the same level of consciousness that created it. So Humanity's Team is actually, this is our entire focus. These things that are his quotes, which are that what again, the Nobel Prize for Physics, October last year, entanglement. It's going into this whole rather abstract notion that the whole of the universe is an energy field. It's vibrational. Energy means vibrational, right? Low to high vibration. And also spiritual, and many people have heard we're spiritual beings inhabiting a physical body, right? And then we're the whole ocean in a drop, meaning all of the capacity and capability of that universe is actually accessible to us in this energy field or spiritual field. So this is really what Humanity's Team was formed around, was this whole optical delusion of this whole notion that there's a sense of separation. We work with all of the scientists now. We work with Nassim Haramein and his Resident Science Foundation. He's a physicist. And we work with Bruce Lipton. He's a biologist. And Greg Braden, who's also a scientist. We work with, there's Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences out in California, who's been working with entanglement, for over a decade. So we work with a lot of the scientists. We also work with spiritual leaders like Michael Bernard Beckwith, and we worked with embodied practices, yoga, meditation, all these things. So, but the science is bringing in this whole thing that, again, can sound very foreign to people if they're new to this, or this notion that we're actually not, that when we get into quantum scale, what we see is that we're, of course, separate physical bodies, but there's an energy field, a spiritual basis that actually encompasses all of the planet, the entire universe, every person, animal life, plant life. So that's really, that's science, and that those mystical teachings are at the basis of Humanity's Team. Now, the reason they're at the basis is not because this could all sound really abstract. What makes it not abstract is this very simple thing. Most of us have a partner, or we're married or something. And then we have a family unit, right? So now in a family unit, there's connection, right? We're in a family unit. That's why we call it a unit. There's the connection here between us. Now, when there's a connection, if we're a mature person, then that means there's responsibility. We carry some responsibility for the unit, right? And again, just going one step further, if we're mature, that means we're going to take positive action, to nurture and support the unit. So those things go together: connection, responsibility, and positive action. So now where science is affirming, well, wait a minute, they say, this whole, bring in the Einstein quote, the optical delusion, don't think that the only unit that you're a part of is your family. You have to move the fence posts out. If you want to look at ultimate reality, and escape the optical delusion, you have to move the fence posts out to the whole of mankind, 8 billion people, the planet, animal life and plant life. You're actually part of that. In fact, the whole universe. But we could just, for purposes of this conversation, focus on the planet. And that means if we do feel a sense of connection, then we're going to, feel what level of responsibility might we take and what positive action might we take? So, and it doesn't mean any of us can do everything, because we can't. It's a huge planet, but all of us can do something, and we all want to do something where we start self-identifying this way. So that's really the focus of Humanities Team. And of course, when you talk about social change and trying to create a sustainable and flourishing planet, education is always key, right? For any social change, it's always education's the most powerful tool in our toolkit when we talk about affecting social change. So what did this nonprofit do, Humanities Team? Well, we created the world's largest, in the nonprofit realm, transformational education streaming platform. So with hundreds of programs that we stream in science, again, and mystical teachings and embodied practices, philosophy, all of these best practices that talk about how to live consciously, where we heal this optical delusion, so to speak. So, and we are translating it so that in every language all over the planet they can access the streaming platform. And since we're a nonprofit, we're just constantly getting the price down, because we're not trying to grow profits here, right? We're trying to get the platform in every home on the planet. So we've been dropping the price down, monthly price down, created a 1-for-1 program like the Tom Shoes thing. So we give away every time somebody purchases the subscription, we give away a subscription to people, especially outside the US, where even an economical platform like ours is too much money for a lot of people on this, what we call conscious journey. So that's really what I was called to there, back when 2001, when I signed those papers. Let me just bring in one other thing to try and make this a little less abstract. People are probably familiar with the Galileo story, right? So Galileo was this, he was born in the late 1500s, and in the early 1600s, he was said to be still viewed, as the father of science at that time, modern science. He was the father of modern astronomy and of quantum physics. So he was known as the father of these things in that day. Now, there were many inventions that he was bringing forward through his research. He created a telescope, was able to look out into the universe. And the thing that got him into a lot of trouble, but that changed the whole world, is he, at that time in the early 1600s, we were in what they call geocentric astronomy, which meant that the teachings of at that time in the church and science were that the entire universe was actually revolving around the Earth. So that's what the geocentric belief was. The entire universe was revolving around the Earth. And then what Galileo shared is he said, hey, wait a minute, public. We got some real problems here. One, we're in a solar system, right? So the Earth is in a solar system. There are planets here, and they're revolving around the sun. So the sun is not in a planet. They're not revolving around the Earth. We are in a solar system, and we're revolving around the sun. And our solar system is way out on the edge of the universe. We're not in the center of the universe at all. Now, that might not sound like such a big deal, but in the early 1600s, this was a very big deal. And you may know the church, there were a lot of killings going on. And he was almost killed, but he was able to stay under house arrest to the end of his life and not be murdered because he finally recanted. He said that the church made him recant and say, okay, just kidding, that we are the center of the universe. But it was too late. His science, his findings were all out in the public, and others started verifying his findings. So it was too late to recant, and the whole world changed. Now, the reason I'm bringing in this here now is because what we believe in Humanities Team is we're at another Galileo moment. So almost all of us were taught in our science classes that we're physical bodies, and at the end of our life, we go to bones and dust 6 feet under. So that's almost all of us grew up that way. It's actually very true. It's all true. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is it's very incomplete. Is all of this other science now, quantum physics, biology, et cetera, is bringing in that we're actually, yes, there's a physical body, but we're actually spiritual beings, energetic, vibrational beings inhabiting a physical body. And it's game changing, just like it is for me, where I went and now, conscious business is what I talk about, how you set up a conscious culture and start and grow your conscious business. And how you can you harness, wow, lightning in a bottle when you do create conscious businesses. It's different than conventional business. So now this whole the new science, these new teachings, these new, like a culture of a conscious business, these are all new things. And it's a Galileo moment. We need to, our perspective in humanities team is we need to educate ourselves, understand these teachings that are out there that go beyond just the physical body, so we can live into ultimate reality and not, as Albert Einstein said, just be deceived by this optical delusion that we walk around with.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you. Steve, what did it feel like when the light bulb went off that it may be, it's highly probable that this is true? We don't know. There's no facts to it. I mean, science is not it's not finished until the end of the world, right? It's still a work in progress. But when the light bulb went off, this is highly probable that this is true, that we are all connected through this spiritual force. I mean, everything you did in life from that moment probably changed. It probably impacted every single thing, from going to the grocery store to the guy who pisses you off that's behind you in the car honking the horn, because then you realize, well, we're connected. Like, I mean, it affects everything, right?
Actually, there was a moment there in the mid 1990s there when I was owner of these companies, where I had that moment, where I sat and this whole self-identification or self-definition thing happened, where I had these two realities side by side. My whole life I've been Linda and Joe's son, so I'll live to a certain age, and then I'm going to go to my 6 feet under. So this is one reality, and the other reality is this whole ocean and a drop, and I'm offspring of the one that goes by many names. And part of ocean and a drop means I also have everlasting life. I'll be born into other lifetimes. There's a non-physical reality, and that there's unlimited potential, that we can harness, actually, especially where we're focused on the greater good, health and well-being of communities and the planet. So where I sat with these two realities, and in that second reality, my parents still have a place, but they're more of the airport terminal. They're the ones that delivered me here on the planet, not the source of it all. The source of it all is the one that's the same source as you, Dr. Finance, and your viewers and listeners. We're all coming from that same source, that one energy field. So I had to sit with that, and I am primarily which one, this one or this one, because I'm not going to be schizophrenic and walk around with one foot in both worlds. So, and I did have, I made that decision of, no, okay, I'd seen enough. To your question, I'd read enough from Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer and on these leaders of old that we've heard about. I've referenced Hippocrates and Plato, but there are many over the years, these classical leaders, these scientists, David Bohm, Erwin Schrödinger, another Nobel Prize winner for physics. I mean, on Humanities Team, we have a Changing Humanities Future page where we've got all these quotes. If you go to changinghumanitiesfuture.com and click on the confirmations of a conscious reality, you'll see all these quotes that support this notion that there's a big energetic, vibrational, spiritual field that is the fullness of the universe. And I felt into that back in the 90s and said, I'm primarily this. And then that's when your whole life changes, because when your belief system, and your basis is everything stems from that. That's the root of all of your life. And so then I moved in this completely different direction based on that decision that I made. And you're right. It's even today, if you Google these things that I'm talking about, you'll see they're different perspectives. There's no definitive, it's 100% positively this, but there are so many leaders back to antiquity that have talked about this, and there's so much modern science now that's coming in on this. And there's so much, where we talk about energy, that we're energetic beings, and our vibration, where it's low, we get sick and we can be angry, and where it's high, we can feel great. We're more in flow. We can even not get sick, and we can even become healers. So this isn't going to sound too foreign to people. We've all heard this. But to the extent that these things are true, then, now we're going outside of that science that we grew up with. We did not grow up in the classroom with this science. There's a new science here. That's why we call it the Galileo moment. There are new things to consider, new understandings to embrace. So my process was, one, educate myself. Then two, it's no good to educate yourself if you're not going to embody and express those teachings. That's the fruit, right? Why understand it? Say, well, I understand it, but I don't want to do anything with it. What good would that do? So the second E is embody and express. That's where the fruit is. And then the third is engage. Engage others. Don't proselytize. We don't want to be proselytized, but just live it. Let people feel your energy and create. We create master classes all over the place with all these scientists and these spiritual leaders, and Ken Wilber, a philosopher, and then all these embodied practices in the martial arts and yoga and dancing and meditation, all these things. So because all of these practices help to educate and help us to really live into this, it's really a whole new way of living on the earth that I am, again, one of the things I explained in this book, which is my 50-year true journey, A New Universal Dream, is I explain how in my earlier times growing up, I'd have good days and bad days. And it was more of a roller coaster life of today, boy, today sucks, or today's a great day. And a more logic center of the mind, just up and down and all around. And now I'd call it more, it's more like flow. If you ever have scuba dived or snorkeled and you've gone to these drift diving places where you just put your arms out and you're just in flow. And it doesn't mean that your problems go away, because there still are challenges and problems in life, but you come at it in a whole different way. You have a different perspective. Your energy field is different. Your whole view of life is different. So there's quite a contrast between the young me and this person that I've grown into.
Where are you currently stationed at? You in California still, or in Colorado?
No, I'm in Boulder. Yeah, right here, coming into you live, Boulder, Colorado. And we're based here, but we have leaders all over the world. We have over 65 country coordinators all over the world. And we've got a team that works on creating all these master classes and our streaming platform and all kinds of stuff.
Thank you, Steve. So Steve, we're going to move into our next segment where we have a bunch of questions, figure about 1 to 2 minutes each, and then we'll get into it. Okay, great. Thank you, folks. Appreciate you. We're back here. Took a little pause here. We're with Steve Farrell. Steve, how do you say your last name? Is it Farrell? Is that right?
Yeah, Farrell, like Farrell's ice cream, right?
Farrell's, okay. All right. Thank you so much. So we're here with Steve Farrell, co-founder of Humanity's Team, also just an amazing person, entrepreneur, highly successful. As we found out, he created 2 $75 million a year businesses. But look at another number from a finance standpoint. The value of those companies is well over $1 billion. When you hit that club, folks, that is you're an elite member of the entrepreneur community. So he's earned his badges. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you. He's doing a lot of amazing stuff today. So you heard his story, folks. We're now going to deep dive into some questions. First thing we're going to talk about is, and these are not, the first ones are really not questions. It's more to get to know more about what you're doing. You have some books. So can you tell us a little about your books and maybe just give a synopsis of that? Figure about 1 minute to 2 minutes each one of these. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, you bet. So my book, it's called A New Universal Dream. You can go to a newuniversaldream.com to find it. The first 4 chapters of the book are opened up there. And I give away my masterclass too, where you just enter your receipt number for the book, whether you buy the soft copy or the digital version. You enter your receipt number, and I give away my $299 masterclass. It's called Conscious Leadership. So, because again, we're a nonprofit, we're just trying to get these messages out in the world, but the book is took me a good number of years to write because it's my true story from 11-year-old kid to today. This whole adventure thing, where I came into this whole. First of all, I came into the all of the wealth that we've been talking about, financial wealth. Then I'm called away to the conscious journey and kind of what is that? How does that work? How did I live into it? What were my lessons learned? So throughout the book, I stop and I share. Wow, this was a lesson I learned here. This was the wisdom that came to me. This was the process that came to me. And the whole objective of it in telling my over 50-year true story is to, we're living in a time of change. People are looking for meaning, for more purpose. They're, a paycheck alone isn't doing it. And I think this journey I've been on really takes somebody to a place where you can find the real deliciousness in life, I might call it, or true prosperity. So I wanted people, and also wanted to make it easier for people and not have to struggle through all the things I struggled through by just laying it out of, wow, this is what I learned here. And, you might learn it too.
Thank you, Steve. How many books do you have? Is that's the one?
So this is, I did write a chapter for another book on conscious business, and it's called A Moment of Choice. I wrote chapter 11 for that book. I've written for magazines and things, but this is my first book, A New Universal Dream. And wow, it's only came out about 5 weeks ago. And in its first week, the category that I'm in is memoir for social activism. So you've got Mandela and you've got Martin Luther King, all of these kinds of books there in that category. And I shot up to number 2 in the first week, falling back some.
So this book is brand new.
Yeah, it's brand new.
Do you have a copy you can show us?
I do. Yeah. It's so and
can you hold it like this, Steve, so we can see the full thing?
Oh yeah. Can you see it better now?
A little bit. If you push it back a little bit more towards you, come towards you.
Okay.
And then put one hand on top and one on this. I'm just teaching my publicity training here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. And what was is there a forward there?
There is. Yeah. Neil Donald Walsh writes the forward, and he shares what I'm sharing here. That did Steve find? He came into all of this financial wealth, but then he found real prosperity and abundance and deliciousness in life. And he says, is this maybe did he find something maybe that you want to explore too?
Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you move it back closer to you just a little bit? So yeah, a little bit more. So and higher. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. All right, there we go. Now we see your name.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Universal Dream. Again, you go to anewuniversaldream.com and tells a little more about the book. You can read the first 4 chapters, and then if you do buy the book, enter your receipt number there, because we got a $300 masterclass. It's pretty comprehensive that I think you'll get a lot out of, that we give you for free.
Thank you, Steve. I love that cover, by the way. That's an awesome cover. What is that showing?
Yeah, so you can see the lights. So you've got headlights there in the yellow coming up the hill, and then you can see the tail lights there. So it's it's clearly an adventure and the adventure looks like it's done a U-turn where you've kind of gone in a whole new direction, which is kind of what happened here in my case, where I'm with all of these celebrity entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. Then I'll go ahead and try to put it down.
Thank
and then
you.
I go in this whole new direction toward this whole conscious living thing, which, let me just say this on conscious living, conscious business. In business, you want to create and grow an unbelievable and lucrative business, start a conscious business. That's how they didn't call it conscious business back in the 90s, but that's how I created the financial wealth to do what I'm doing. There was a lot of conscious business in what I created. You capture lightning in a bottle when you create a truly conscious business.
What now? You're saying creating a conscious business, but you have a nonprofit organization, so it could be either way, I guess, right? Or
yeah. So it's a conscious culture, is what it is,
yeah.
And you can put it in a for-profit, you can put it in a nonprofit, you can put it in any business, but it's where you're putting best practices inside of that business in terms of the culture that you create. And when you do it, and you do it with real heart, you wouldn't do it just with the notion that you wanted to make a bunch of money. But if you do it with real heart, and you're with love and service, wow, you watch the customers, the employees, the vendors, the opportunity come to you. This is my third one here with Humanities Team, where we've just gone big in a very short period of time.
Wow. And Steve, I got to say, thinking back, because I know Ken Foster, I want to give a shout out to him for introducing us originally, probably about a year ago or so. I'm glad we did it now. I mean, things are funny how timing always works out. It always seems to work out exactly when it was supposed to, because like if we did it before, I wouldn't be able to show your book, right? It happened exactly when it was supposed to. Now we get to see your book, and you have more wisdom since then. So it was perfect timing.
Timing, yeah, as they say. Right.
Thank you, Steve. All right, Steve. So next topic, not so much a question, really. I want to deep dive a little into Humanities Team. You already gave us a great story behind it. Maybe just for a minute or two, if you can give us a summary of it, some of the major players in there, their roles, maybe the financial structure of it, anything you'd like to add to it that you haven't already discussed, to kind of give us the facts, the highlights of it in maybe a minute or two.
Great. Yeah. So a 501c3 Humanities Team, 20 years old. So been around a good while. We're the #1 global nonprofit in transformational education. So transformational education is just when we talk about this whole new science, this new self-identification, this whole conscious living, a different way of living on the earth. That's what we address from this nonprofit. In the nonprofit structure, we're able to do this 100% the way that that we're going to have the most reach and impact without any consideration for stockholders. There's no stockholders here at all. It's a nonprofit. So as a nonprofit, we can just go 1,000% in the direction that we want to go in, fund it, implement the strategy for it, and where we bring in the kinds of things that we do, where we're talking about, a oneness of the universe, these best practices in conscious business and all of these kinds of things. We don't have to, if you're a for-profit, you've got to really carefully consider your messaging and even your mission, because you've got stockholders. We don't have any of those considerations. We just go straight at what we know to be true ourselves. And we created a culture where we come together in this place of service, in this place of appreciation and transparency, a dream, this dream of a sustainable and flourishing planet in an inspired way of working together. These are some of the best practices that are here that work in a for-profit or nonprofit. And, you capture lightning in a bottle I would still call us a relatively small organization, but it's unbelievable the reach that we have.
And now, a nonprofit or a for-profit, they both have the same dynamics. You still need to make money. A common fallacy finance students have is they think that they're two different things. They're kind of basically the same thing. It's just where the money's going is funneled to a different direction, as opposed to back into the owners themselves. So they have everything else in common, though. They need to generate revenue. They need to build wealth, but it's just the funneling of that wealth. So curious though, what is it like creating a nonprofit organization? Who they're still owners of this per se? Like, how do you do it officially? How do you make everything official? Because there's a lot of red tape you got to go through.
Yeah. So you've got to become a nonprofit with the IRS, which is not a simple process. And that means there's a guiding, mission that is philanthropic. So that's got to be in there. Ours was to spread these conscious teachings, to be as an educational organization. So we still have a board of advisors, a board of directors. We have a board of advisors as well. So we still have people that are in here looking at our strategies and things, but they're not affected by personal profit, notions of personal profit. As you mentioned, it's cash flow, for any organization. You've got an organization, people are getting paid, you've got bills to pay. Cash flow is essential in a nonprofit or a for-profit. So we still have those cash flow issues. At 20 years old, we're now a mature organization. We have got great scale on the side of just selling these subscriptions for the streaming platform. And then we're a 501c3. So there are many that are donating to us now to support this reach and impact, this dream that we have of putting the platform in every home on the planet with translation, so that what we're calling conscious living, with the science and with the embodied practices and the spirituality, where it's all there. We contend you only need to go through 2 or 3 of the classes, and we have hundreds, including live programs almost every day. And you really get what I'm talking about, this whole notion that, there is another way to live with meaning and purpose, to live with flow instead of bad day, good day. So we have a healthy donor community and that we're building to contribute to that, because our initiative called Changing Humanity's Future is by 2040, 17 years from now, to have a sustainable and flourishing planet. So that's a pretty big lift, and there are a lot of people attracted to that dream.
Are you able to go into any of the financial statistics of where your net worth is and all that stuff, kind of like you did with your other company? Or
Yeah, well, my net worth, when I sold when I sold ENS, when we sold the second one, we had venture money in it. It was not a financial success. When we sold the first one, we sold it for 29 million. And then, but the first one, by the way, as you mentioned, with the venture backing, and what we were worth at the time, I mean, it was incredible. I was up there near $1 billion, in personal financial net worth. I'm not, anything in that realm, but through.
wait, you sold it? I'm sorry to interrupt you. It was a $75 million a year revenue, and you sold it for 29 million.
Yeah, because we kept inside of it the part that became Netigy that grew to like $1 billion in revenue.
Oh, okay. You retained some ownership still.
Yeah. So I've been able to just, from harvesting the wealth that I created in the 90s to I haven't had a paycheck since the 90s. In running this nonprofit, I don't draw a paycheck.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you, Steve. Steve, what's it like working with Neil Donald Walsh? So Neil Donald Walsh, folks, he wrote the Conversations with God book, became a movie, major player in the spiritual movement, and that's Steve's co-founder as well. And I see them on Clubhouse. They run a weekly room. So yeah, what's it like working with him?
Yeah, it's amazing. What I like to say, Neil wouldn't describe himself this way, but the way I see him, and when we're on calls together, I tell him, this is what I see, is it's like if you have the challenges that we have in today's world with all of the evolution and the gear shifting and these things that we're looking at that we need to heal, and remedy, it doesn't surprise me at all that somebody would be chosen to convene, I'll call it, the big global conversation with the deity, the divine, or the God, or the universe of our understanding. He came out with book 1 there in 1995, and then 8 books after that, a total of 9 books, where the wisdom is so off the charts, way beyond Neil. Neil is the first to say that. He asks the questions. That wisdom that comes through in the books caused that book 1 to be on the New York Times bestseller list for 37 weeks.
Wow.
Which is a long time. So everybody was reading the books back in the 90s, even still, a lot of people are reading them. So the wisdom is so astounding that you really can't even punch holes in it, that it has affected quite a lot of change. He's incredibly devoted to those messages, getting them out in the world. He does speaking engagements and classes, seminars and retreats all the time. He's coming up on age 80. He still works, a 6-day week. Incredibly devoted to really helping people gain a new understanding, about God and life. What I was talking about there myself, where my own spirituality and the Catholic Church. Essentially, if you've read any of the Conversations with God books, the deity that you come to see is one of pure love, just a pure love. It's unbelievable, really, how pure that love is for all of us and the planet and in our many lifetimes and these things. And that's his devotion, is to help people move from these beliefs that, boy, if we get it wrong, we could end up in a pretty messy place at the end of our life, into this other whole new understanding about how life really works and where we go, at the end of our life. So it's a special thing to work with Neil.
And I love everything you're doing, Steve. I really applaud you. And again, congrats on the new book, and having Neil as doing the forward of that. That's amazing. So congrats on that. My next question is, so part of your humanities team and a lot of things that you do, you also have a podcast, and I see you're interviewing a lot of folks. Just curious from a business standpoint, what is the financial value of interviewing high profile celebrities? So I'm curious from the podcast perspective. You're I think 106 or 107 interview, something like that here. I'm just curious, like at the highest level, you got people like Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan who are doing extraordinary things, and I aspire to be like that. But you're doing your stuff and you're interviewing people in a different way. Every great interview that you have, you get closer to reaping financial value for you or your organization, whether it's a nonprofit or profit in some way, directly or indirectly. Would you agree with that? And if so, again, the question is, what is the financial value of interviewing high profile celebrities?
So, well, there's no question, these iconic speakers that we have, the scientists, also, some of the mediums. Suzanne Giesemann now is huge. She's the one that was would fly on Air Force One, with the president. She was the assistant to the Joint Chiefs of Staff there in the Navy, and then she retired and became a medium. So, I mean, talk about an interesting journey. And she's now one of the most acclaimed mediums in the country. She's extraordinary, and so she's one of them. The scientists, of course, I mentioned Michael Beckwith, of course, Neil Donald Walsh. All of them, Deepak, almost everybody but Oprah has come in and been featured as a speaker, that even creating master classes with us. We've got a new master class we're creating right now with a Jan Van Zant, who's of course one of the Oprah leaders. James Van Praagh is another one coming in, who's also a very esteemed, acclaimed medium. Charles Eisenstein has just put educational programs on the platform. Now they come in because we're a nonprofit with this objective. I'll call it a noble objective, where in today's world, almost everybody would agree that, wow, we got some major challenges here, for our kids and future generations. Almost everybody would agree with that. We're coming in and saying, and we have the remedy. We have a way that we can live together where we can actually remedy this, and create at an individual and collective level health and healing and well-being. So naturally, there are a lot of people, those people I just mentioned, the scientists, Michael, Neil, Ken Wilber, all of these leaders that have come on with their programs, come on into the podcast. They're real excited about helping us to support this whole journey into a sustainable and flourishing planet, and humankind. So on the financial level, yes, if we were a for-profit and you valued this, it would be a substantial valuation on it. It's a nonprofit, but where you have the kind of revenue that's growing and reach and impact and email list and social media reach and so on. I don't actually think of it in those terms anymore, because now I'm thinking more in the terms of my thing, which is, Steve, before you transition from this planet, what people call death, I want to be well on our way to this whole new way of living on the earth. And that's my North Star. So every morning that I get up, that's the thing of how are we going to move in that direction today? What are the new things that are going to propel us in that direction? And that's really almost the only thing I think about.
That's a brilliant response. If you can humor me though, because I know that it's going against your normal way of thinking, but if we can go back to, let's use a for-profit organization, because that's the best way to do it. So let's say we got a for-profit organization. Every celebrity, would you say it goes up in value that you interview?
Probably. Yeah.
Okay. And a better question, let's say we got Oprah. and you
Yeah,
were interviewing Oprah, would you say that the value of whatever you're doing on a for-profit organization just went up? And if so, can you put a percentage to it?
for sure. Now that's hard. Yeah, because some of it is how well are you distributed? How well are you getting out that broadcast? Some of it is things like that. Because if you weren't media savvy and you didn't have the infrastructure to support the marketing, it could be a tree falling in the night. But assuming that you really had good infrastructure and good marketing savvy and so on, then yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could make the case, that it would add a lot of value, more than six-figure value to your organization, probably.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you humoring me with the question. Of course, there's no definite answer to it, but I respect your experience. You from both a business level as well as walking down Humanity's team and all the things you're doing with them as well. So, yeah, thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. All right, Steve. So next question. Who are some of the celebrities that you've interviewed? And you mentioned some here, but any other ones you'd want to add to the list?
Yeah, gosh, let me just give you some people in real time. So, and we've got, again, with our with the stable of classes that we have, it's quite extensive. So, people like Mark Nepo, so people that are on the Oprah 100, there's a good number of them. Mark Nepo. Let's see, I'm going to just give me a second again. I want to, it's funny, I should probably just have them all on the tip of my tongue, but
Take your time, Steve.
so I'll give you some here as
And they can find this information from your website too, if they want.
Yeah, you go to humanitiesteam.org and you'll find it on our website. So, Dr. Eben Alexander wrote Proof of Heaven. We're doing a program with him right now. Karen Newell, who's his partner and amazing in her own right. Suzanne Giesman, who I mentioned, she's this medium that used to fly on Air Force One, now and a very esteemed medium. Andrew Harvey, Jude Curavan. I've mentioned Greg Braden, who's got a whole bunch of master classes on the site. Wayne Dyer's, his daughters, his two youngest daughters, Sage and Serena Dyer, and also Karen Noe, an esteemed medium. Boy, let me just stop and just say something here real quick about that. This is, again, for people in the mainstream, the notion of life after death maybe seems foreign. I work with the near-death experience community and all day long. I work with mediums all day long. And I can tell you, I mean, here's a class we created. It was called Life After Death. Wayne Dyer's two daughters and a medium. Now, people may know Wayne Dyer, he died in 2015, right? He was out in Hawaii. You can Google it and read about it. But after he passed, he came to another medium that was part of Hay House, this publisher that Wayne was part of. And it was Wayne, and said he wanted to talk to his family. So Karen reached out to the kids and his wife, Marceline, and then began this huge conversation with the family. And a couple of things here just to point out, because it might sound so disbelieving, just to kind of add some fact to what happened here. So his daughter, Serena, he was talking to, and he said that you're pregnant. She tells the story, by the way, in this Life After Death masterclass that we created. You'll see it on the humanitiesteam.org website. So he says, Serena, you're pregnant. And she says, oh, she has a 6-month-old. She says, I'm not pregnant. I had a baby that's 6 months ago, and I'm not pregnant now. And he says, no, you're pregnant and you're going to deliver your baby on July 4th. And the whole family's like, I guess she had a glass of wine the night before, and the family's like, God, Serena, you didn't tell us. And, you're drinking wine. What are you doing? And when you're pregnant, and she says, okay, I am going to go take a pregnancy test, and I'm going to show you and Dad, if he's there, that this is all hogwash. So you know what happens next. She takes the pregnancy test. She is pregnant and she's due on July 4th. Now, if that's not enough, then Serena's delivering her baby with her daughter, Sage, who's the other faculty member here. She's in the hospital delivery room, delivering her baby, and Sage's cell phone rings. And Sage says, hello, and it's Karen Noe, the medium that had been bringing Wayne through. And she says, I've got Wayne here, and Wayne wanted to be with Serena while she delivers the baby. And there was no publicity given at all to this delivery. Nobody would know. It wasn't out on, so you don't tell social media you go into the hospital to deliver a baby. Those are just two of the many stories that they tell about Wayne Dyer. And Karen Noe then actually wrote a book called We Consciousness, all from Wayne Dyer and other St. Francis and others had come together with Wayne Dyer in the afterlife to write this book called We Consciousness. So that whole story we tell in this masterclass called Life After Death. Again, when I say that I don't believe in death and I work around these people all day long, I'm exposed to these stories all day long. People may know Dr. Eben Alexander's story too, Proof of Heaven, where he talks about this whole near-death experience and how he brought back, came back to life with this whole new notion of this one consciousness, what I'm describing, this primacy of the soul, as he calls it. All of these scientists and surgeons and academics that I work around bring back the same story, which is why in my home there's no such thing as death. We don't talk about death. There's a continuation day. We go to the non-physical realm, but we don't actually just die to bones and flesh and go 6 feet under. Okay, so Patricia Coda Robles is another one. Nassim Harriman, who has the Resonance Science Foundation. Joan Borisenko and Thomas Hubel, who's out of Europe, who's amazing, is another one.
I saw a Hubble on there. Was there a Miss Hubble? I wonder if she's related to
Hubel. Thomas Hubel. Yeah, right. And then we have all these live programs, Soul Circles, that's on a Thursday, Raising Your Vibration, also on a Thursday. So those are just a few of the teachers that we have. Bruce Lipton, Michael Beckwith, Deborah.
Bruce Lipton, by the way, he's one of the head biology guys. I know I read his book somewhere. Was he did he write textbooks in biology or something like that?
He was a medical school instructor, and then he worked at Stanford for many years, a biologist, and he's the one that really brought in this whole new biology of epigenetics, which epigenetics says that this consciousness, our own consciousness or super consciousness, can override our subconsciousness. This whole thing that we grew up with of the DNA of cancer, of all these things, he says, most of it's bogus. There's only a very small percentage of these things passed down to us through heredity that can't be overcome by our conscious understanding. He's an amazing biologist that's giving this whole new perspective to what we call conscious living, where when I talk about living in flow, he calls that the honeymoon effect, and wrote a whole book called The Honeymoon Effect, which describes how we can live in this place instead of roller coaster up and down. Just live in a reality that is really, in flow, a delicious way to live your life.
And one point I want to add to that real quick. You had mentioned this earlier, I forgot to say. So I'm part of this 13 Steps to Riches series, going over Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich book. We got all these celebrities that are sprinkled in each book. And on book 11, it was about subconscious mind. That was his 11th step to riches, Napoleon Hill. And this was 1937, almost 100 years ago. In that book, he quotes about connecting the subconscious mind to infinite intelligence. And it's almost like a radio that you can dial in at any moment if you train your brain properly to be able to connect to anything in the universe to pull out information. So, I mean, this kind of ties into a lot of the things you were talking about, and coming from a money perspective as well. this was definitely his most bizarre chapter out of all his ones, but he went on the edge with this. But 100 years later, everything that you're talking about, all the scientific part is starting to prove that it wasn't as wacky as people think. It might actually be, he might have been onto something. So
Yeah, no, these terms, omnipresence, omniscience, omnipotence, they're real. We've been talking about in the human dimension of that, but in the financial dimension, there have been stock market, crashes here between the 1990s when I sold this business, and now I was guided around them. Get out of the market and then get back in. I was guided through those. The guidance and is there on every level, relationship, financial, every level. If you listen to that still small voice that is a part of what this whole conscious living thing is.
thank you, Steve. Steve, next question. We're going to talk about your events. You've got a lot of amazing events. Maybe in a minute or so, can you tell us about some of the events that you have?
You bet. So, of course, we've got these new programs coming out all the time, these new masterclasses. This one right now called Unlocking the Intelligence of the Afterlife with Dr. Eben Alexander, Karen Newell, Suzanne Giesman is the current masterclass, but the Ayanla Van Zant or Alanya Van Zant, then the James Von Prague. These are a few that are in pipeline coming. We do a summit once a year. It's in October. It's called the Global Oneness Summit. A lot of incredible leaders from all over the world come in. We'll broadcast for 4 days in October, the 21st through the 24th. It's a free summit, and they come in and talk about this whole conscious living thing from every angle: science, creativity, etc. Every day of the week, almost, we've got live programming, a part of this subscription service. So I mentioned the Soul Circles and Raising Your Vibration are two of the programs. The Wayne Dyer's daughters are creating a live program that's coming in. Urban Laszlo, over in Europe with the Club of Budapest, he's got a year-long program that'll broadcast weekly. In fact, with Ken D. Foster as the host. These are just a few of the programs, live programs and video trainings. Lots and lots of free programs. So if you don't have any budget at all, and you go to humanitiesteam.org, you can go up top there in navigation to programs and pull down the free programs one, and there's tons of them. You'll learn a lot just going through the free programs.
And you have a main summit that happens, I think, once or twice a year. Something like 1 million people go to. Is that right?
Yeah. This is the Global Oneness Summit. Yeah, that we started in 2010, and it's huge. Our common friend Ken D. Foster is a part of it. Lots of these iconic speakers that I referenced come in to speak during the summit and share their wisdom.
Twice a year or once a year?
It's once a year in October. Yeah, it's free. So if you go to Google globalonenesssummit.org, and you'll see the summit. You just leave your name and email address, and then for 48 hours you can watch all of the programs for free, or you can on the streaming platform, the whole thing is given to you for free as a recording, so you can listen to it as much as you want.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate that. Folks, check that out. So what is compelling you to dig deeper into the trenches of some of the hardest problems of humanity? So, I mean, let's face it, this is, when you're talking about the concepts we've discussed today, it's not, how to fix a bus or, something very, very simple and linear. This is complex. This is like 4D, not even 3D. You're talking about the biggest problems of the universe, and especially our planet. Like, how to resolve these issues really can elevate consciousness, elevate humanity to another level. What's drawing you to this?
So two things. One,
I mean, let's face it, Steve, sorry to interrupt you. I mean, you could have been on a beach, sipping margaritas for the past 20 years. Instead, you chose to keep going and do it differently. There's got to be another reason beyond money.
Yeah, no, I have the abundance I could do really nice vacations all the time. I don't do many. I do a few. I don't do many. I do this. I'm here doing this instead. And the reason I choose this instead of really nice, luxurious vacations is two things. One, I mentioned all these near-death experience people that we work with, and the mediums that we work with, we're the afterlife, where you're talking to your loved ones who have passed, angels and guides and things. they all share the exact same story here around at the end of our life. So let me briefly describe it. It's called a life review that you go through. And the life review, right after you pass, it's not a recording, it's live. You're going in live to the major events in your life where you're now seeing yourself through the eyes of another. So Dr. Finance, I'm going to say where I see you talking to me and what you were thinking about me and feeling about me. And then, those other parts of my life, same thing, the major person in my life watching me, what they were thinking and feeling. And you follow the trajectory of your whole life, and then where you feel and see what people were thinking around you. This is what the life review is. It's all that it is. There's no other parts to it, just that. Then there's a question that's asked after that of, when you go to your next life, do you want to do anything different? Do you want to, and obviously in many cases, it's going to be, gosh, I wish I were more truthful or more loving or more in service or more supportive, more nurturing, something like that is often what comes out of that life review. So, and again, I've heard this might sound abstract or nutty, but I promise you from as many people as I've heard this from, that it's true. And this is what will happen at the end of our life. At the end of my life, why in the world would I want to be reviewing people thinking, where I'm not loving, I'm not truthful, I'm not in service. I want to be all of those things now. And then when I go through the life review, I don't want to, why have my ladder against the wrong wall? And then I have to go through the doggone life review and see that. So that's number one. Number two is, I look at this planet and I look at, the term even existential crisis even surfaces. There's actually a human extinction movement. If you Google it, you can go read about it, where they're saying, oh, things are so bad that we need to extinguish the whole human race on the planet. Well, I'm not going to go to that kind of crazy thought process. I look at the challenges and I say, let's create that path, that journey to a truly sustainable and flourishing earth, where the physicality of the planet that I grew up on, beautiful nights and days and the warm breezes and seasons, and there's no smoke and hurricanes and tornadoes and all the things we're experiencing today. Let's get back to that for future generations. Those are the two things that drive me. So one, I want to have people have an experience of me that I want them to have, and I want to be the person I want to be. Two, I want to, like I say, before I leave this planet, I'm going to do everything in my power to support that sustainable and flourishing planet. And to me, that's a lot more fun and interesting and important to focus on those things than luxurious vacations.
Brilliant response. Thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate you. What are your thoughts on, speaking of existential, it was perfect time for this. So Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, one of the most important books for purpose. And in there, he created a concept called existential frustration, where people were frustrated with their existence. What are your thoughts on this concept as it applies to money? Basically money and power, they're all just, they're not the end, right? It's just, if you want all the money in the world and you get all the money in the world, you're still not going to be happy. You're going to be frustrated with your existence.
Yeah, I can tell you with all honesty, I know this is the thing about my life, which I share in the book, is I was there. I sat at the table. I was in what they call forum, where these CEOs were talking about their wives and their kids and the lives they were living. I can tell you, the financial thing alone does not do it. In fact, it actually cranks up the challenge, because you're so invested in keeping that financial wealth growing that there's an enormous pressure on your relationships, all of the relationships around you. That does not walk you into the American dream. Therefore, is an illusion or a mirage, where it's just constantly, the oasis keeps moving out on the horizon, you never get there. There's no there. It's part of why I followed this calling into conscious living. Now, by contrast, when we have financial wealth, and financial wealth is great, it's a gift, but where we use it for the good of the things I'm talking about, supporting conscious living in my home, in the community, out in the world, building streaming platforms, all of these kinds of things. That's my particular calling. There are many different ways to manifest positive change in the world. where our funding is supporting that, then that's when we really come into the deliciousness in life. One of the stories I tell in the book is of a guy named Ken Behring. Okay, he's got a private jet that's like a 737. He's now passed a few years back, but I tell his story because he grew up in real estate, developed these huge properties, Black Hawk in California, Florida community. Then he bought the Seattle Seahawks and owned them for a while. Then he had a museum of antique cars, like 200 of the most unbelievable antique cars, 30,000 square foot home with thousands of bottles of the best wine in the whole world, and a 737 jet. I mean, need I say more? What the heck, what are you going to have besides that, right? Now, I came to know this man because he invited me to go to China with him and his family to do a philanthropic thing. One of my best friend actually worked with Ken for many, many years. Now, what Ken shared is he said, you know what? He died he passed at 92. He said, until I was 80, I never really found it. All this stuff, even my NFL team, all of that. I didn't really, the juiciness, happiness of life was not there until 80. At 80, wow. He started the Wheelchair Foundation, that gives people mobility. And not only does it give people mobility, but the family members would carry them around all day long and couldn't do anything but carry around the family member all day long, were also freed up. And so he was like, he looked at that and said, wow, you just put a wheelchair in a home and unbelievable, the whole family goes into super bloom, So then he started distributing wheelchairs all over the world through his Wheelchair Foundation, which is partly how I came to know him. And then he said, then I found it. I finally found the real treasure. And he spent his last 12 years just flying around the world, giving away as many wheelchairs as he could.
That's a beautiful story. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. And the message there is it's not too late to really come to fruition of helping and serving others.
The more we give ourselves away, the better we feel. That's what I come to. That's a premises of my book. The more we give away, the better we feel.
So Steve, I'd like to move into another section. Okay, Steve. So next question I have, just building off of this layer here. Let's look at oneness. Let's dissect oneness. Okay, so there's pros and cons to this. So one love, you hear from Bob Marley, one love, of course, the general message resonates with most people, I would think. Of course, we're peace and all that stuff. It's a great thing, but there's also side effects to it. Now, with AI, you mentioned AI, of AI coming in here, and we got Elon Musk, who's leading that charge, and also creating robots and chips to put in the back of our heads and stuff like that, the Neuralink. What happens in a situation where we put all this, future barometers on right now? So what happens if we get to the point where one love or oneness means that we're all wired together with this Neuralink at some point? It could be 5 years, it could be 500 years from now, progressing the way we are, right? Like AI, they say technology doubles every 18 years. AI can make that happen every day, right? So let's say that reality kicks in. Where are we going with this? What if we became one? Is that bad? Will we lose our identity? What's your thoughts on it?
So let me just quickly state there are three premises of my book, because it gets to that question. The first premise: there's a universal intelligence that animates and permeates all of life. The second premise: that we are actually designed as part of the one, which means that we're going to be in service to the one. The whole connection, responsibility, positive action thing happens. Three, that the more we give ourselves away, the better we feel. These are the three premise of the book. So as we look at things like AI, what this means is, as we become conscious and understand, and we ourselves on this program have said, my God, this happened and that happened. How did these miracles all happen? How did all these things that were extraordinary, there's no way to describe them, but they happened. How did they happen? Well, there was this whole omniscience, wisdom, right, that's at our fingertips from throughout the universe, even omnipotence, a power that is at our fingertips sometimes. That kicks in. So what I believe here, Dr. Finance, is that in these days ahead, that more and more people are going to become conscious and grow in the direction that I'm talking about, understand life review, all of these kinds of things that are part of our process as we go from physical life to non-physical life and back and forth. And then as we look at things like artificial intelligence, we will deploy artificial intelligence in ways that serve us, that are healthy. When the wisdom about our universe and these more evolved planets is that the technology is a key part of it. It's just that there's a balance between nature and technology. So there's good intelligence that is deployed to make sure that technology is always working to our advantage alongside nature. So I believe that we're flying through turbulence. There will be examples of AI probably in the years ahead where it's used more in a dark way, I'll call it. But I think we'll learn from those things. And I am a glass half full person. So I believe that we'll evolve beyond that to where we use technology to serve us and not to bring any darkness to our planet.
But will we lose our identity at the ultimate scenario where we're all possibly wired together and we become one?
Yeah, no. So in this whole field that I talk about, conscious living, part of its basic premise is diversity and unity, sort of like the states in the United States, North Carolina, South Carolina, California. They don't lose their identity, in the United States. So that's a key dimension of this, that we're not going to go to homogenized milk where we're all the same flavor, the same look. No, that's definitely not part of what's unfolding here.
Thank you. And folks, for the audience out there, I just want to pause and just say, I know this conversation may sound bizarre right now, but in a very short time in the future, you're going to look back on this and it'll sound more normal as we advance in the future. As a fact, if you look at my third book here, The Survival of the Richest, I published early 2016, 500+ page book. Go to chapter 37. I tie in finance, biology, survival, all these crazy topics together. Chapter 37 was called The Evolution of Evolution, and to tie into what Stephen was talking about, I created 2 selectionary processes that was a more advanced version of Charles Darwin's natural selection theory, called the technological selection and monetary selection. So these technologies and the money itself is helping to fuel the selection processes of nature over time. That's where we're hitting this tipping point right now, because technology, which I see as an extension of our wealth, is actually helping to fuel a lot of the current situations that we have. So if you want to expand on that conversation, I would definitely take that as a read. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you, and appreciate your braveness, your courage in answering that question. So, all right. So here, if you think that was a little tough, how about this one? What is the soul? What is the soul? Maybe in a minute.
Yeah. So the soul is, if there's one presence that I talk about that permeates and animates all of life, that's its presence in your body. It is the soul. It's where it's just in a perfect state that is locked and loaded with all of the guidance, the wisdom, the support, everything that we need, locked and loaded and ready to go. Doesn't need to think about anything. It's there.
It's unique though. Is it unique, or is it tied to the oneness? Like we all got individual souls.
Yeah, we all have individual souls. So because we have different gifts that we're bringing to the planet, different things that we want to do. So again, white, which we could call the oneness, as we know, it's white is every color, right? That's mixed together equals white. So it's the same thing here. You're purple, I'm yellow. So I'm going to be, my soul is connected to that one soul, just as yours is, but it's bringing in my gifts, my talents, my interests, things that I want to deliver during this lifetime that are very different from yours. So, but it's the place that does it when we say, talk about listening to that still small voice and being guided by it. That's the soul that we're listening to. And to me, it's not really a voice. It's called, it's more of a feeling. So I've trained myself, instead of going to my head and thinking about it, now I just start feeling into it of what is my truth here? And I give myself, the more quiet that I can create, the more stillness to really sit with something, the more I'll feel into it. I'll feel what that so-called still small voice is guiding me to.
Thank you, Steve. As an extension of that question, go back to Viktor Frankl, and I always talk about him. He survived 4 concentration camps, and he if just by looking at that book, I learned so much. It's a very small book called A Man's Search for Meaning. Talk about purpose, and one of my conclusions in the last book, I had to go through an analysis of survival to make that argument that is connected to finance. So at the top of the list were survival essentials, both physical and mental. Physical, we got water and air and all that stuff. And mental, believe it or not, my conclusion was purpose and a will to live were at the top of the list. So if we have this purpose, we can do anything, right? But when you tie it to the conversation of the soul, I love to hear your answers. What is purpose, right? What is the soul's relationship to purpose itself? Does the soul have a purpose?
The soul's purpose is to live in its highest and grandest expression. And so it's something that we can constantly choose. What is today, my highest and grandest expression? It's evolving. It's always about evolution into the way that we can give in our maximum way, using our own expression. Sometimes for some people it's truth. They're truth tellers. Neil Donald Walsh is one. Other times it's more of a pure love thing. It's a very thoughtful, caring, compassionate, nurturing thing. It can have many different expressions, but all of the expressions are there to uplift humanity, uplift homes, communities, the world. That's just the way the soul works, because it is it's that part of the one, which is that universal thing that is all about, as I mentioned, it's a level of pure love that we can't even wrap our brains around. That's what Conversations with God delivers, is that the old narrative, of this judging and condemning occasionally deity is just not true. That we're now needing to understand, who this soul framework really, what it is and how it works. And we're here we've got individual free choice, so we can do anything that we want. But what we've been getting to, and during this program, is what are the things that we can, since we can do anything we want, how might we direct that energy, of our life to really enjoy fully our life, to actualize, to self-actualize? How might we do that? That's what we're talking about during this program. And the soul is always leading us in that direction.
Is the purpose of the soul, just real quickly, is the purpose of the soul and the purpose of our physical body the same? Do you think it's the same thing, or is it more of a higher level?
It's much more of a higher level than our mental or physical self. Yeah, our physical self seeks, growing up, sex, and physical pleasure. Our mental self also can go in lots of directions in today's world, where we want to think about different things. Our soul is going to always go in the direction, that higher level direction of what is my true highest and grandest self? What might it want to contribute or manifest here now? So it's always going to go in that much higher direction.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you. Steve, next question. What is a God job? I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, in the book,
I heard this on your former interview.
Right. In the book, I tell the story. My mother-in-law, who's now passed, but her name was Artie, and in the early years, she'd say, "Well, tell me about Humanities Team," and I'd tell her, and she said, "Wow, that sounds like a God job." I said, "God job? What an interesting term." And then I sat and thought about it, and all the things we're talking about here, where we're really, it's about really living to our soul's purpose. Creating homes and communities in a world that really works for everybody, creating real health and nourishing and well-being and alchemy and healing in the world. And I thought that's a pretty apt description. So even now internally within Humanities Team, we'll call it that. We don't have the personal agendas getting in the way. Are we going to do this for Steve or for Dee or Neil or something? We don't. That's not what we're about. We're aiming at that North Star, of something more pure, of more creating more healing, more health, more well-being, more alchemy in the world.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Steve, next question is how to stay focused on your life's calling in the face of seemingly endless opposition. So I'm sure you experienced this as an entrepreneur. I've experienced it so much in my life, from just pushing on to get a doctor's degree and writing books and everything I did, even in the real estate business. I invested in a lot of real estate. People call me crazy, and I wound up selling it, made a lot of money off it. But there's always that opposition that's saying you're crazy, and most of the time it's coming from your family and your loved ones. But and I was just watching a documentary of Arnold Schwarzenegger lately, and Arnold's main message is to tune out the negative, right? Tune out the negative when people are saying, so you can focus on what you need to do and accomplish goals. That's what took him to his level. There could be a lot of truth there, but I'd love to hear your take. And again, the question is, how do you stay focused when everyone else is calling you crazy on your life's calling? We're talking about your purpose here again, like, even though it might be nuts.
Yeah, well, another part of the reason I wrote my book is the universal dream, because I tell you, I've had many of those moments. So I can tell you, when I left IBM to start my first company there in 1990, people thought I'd lost my mind. You know, in 1990, it was not cool to be an entrepreneur. So that was not the cool. It was much later that this notion of entrepreneurship and wealth came along. And people said, "What, you're crazy? You're IBM executive resources. Everybody wants to work for IBM. You're on a track to, what are you doing? You know, you're going to go live in a little executive suite with used furniture. Have you lost your mind?" And then if you think that was something, I can tell you, when I achieved all that financial wealth, and then I was, okay, I'm going to leave it all. I'm going to leave the community. I'm leaving Silicon Valley. I'm going to go in this conscious living direction. Boy, if you thought they lost my mind the first time, you should see what happened this time. My poor older brother flew out and said, "Oh my God, you know, Steve, oh geez, you know, come on, you know, what can one person do? You know, you're holding the lottery ticket. Don't burn that ticket, you know, hold on to it." So, and because they care about you. So as you mentioned, you know, this is where we really need to be disciplined with our life and listen to that still small voice, be guided by it. It's why I think I've had the most incredible life, but I've listened to it, you know, and there are moments where it's really hard. It's really, really hard, but you know, down in your bones that you're doing what you're supposed to do. You're being called to something, and you follow that calling. And if you do, then your life is going to turn out fantastic. And if you don't, then, as you know, we can live really very ordinary lives where we're not that plugged into our mission or purpose or our soul's calling. And we know lots of people that are just kind of watching television and life is passing them by.
Steve, brilliant response. Last major question before we get into our quick temple questions. This ties right off of this. Okay, so while we're on this crazy topic, and you're talking about the voice here. Now, no one really wants to admit that they hear voices, but at the highest level, the people that I've interviewed on this podcast, this theme comes about again, over and over. They heard this calling. That's why they call it a calling. There's this voice, and if you listen to it, like you said, you can get guided like a financial, like a barometer of what direction to go, you know, or a compass of where to go. So what can we dive on this concept of voice? What is this voice again? Can you help us to understand, like, for people who never heard it before, dissect it, like make it where it's not a crazy thing. How do we know if we even have the voice? Which voice do we listen to? After all, we got many voices in our head. Every one that we listen to, we're in constant recording of these voices. We can think of a moment from 10 years ago that may be at a setting, a birthday party or something. You can hear people's voices. So we got all these voices in our head. Which one is ours? Which one's our souls? How do or a guardian angel or whatever it is that's telling us?
Right. So it actually, you know, we can train ourselves real well to just completely filter out that those other voices can be cognitive dissonance. And so part of it is when we devote ourselves to this higher calling that we're discussing, and that goes we can use different terms. I'm using conscious living, but or soul's calling. We can use different terms, but where we devote ourselves to it, what I've observed is things like cognitive dissonance go away. So see, I used to have cognitive dissonance there back in the early 90s. I was on a private jet and a private ski area and all, and I grew up the way I grew up, you know, paying for my braces and stuff. And I'm like anybody, I'm like, wow, this is pretty unreal. But I also had the cognitive dissonance voice of, with everything going on in the world, this is really how we're going to spend our life, like doing luxurious things like this. Sure, why not experience it once or twice or three times? But is this what I'm going to make my life about? So once we move in this direction of really, okay, I'm going to be my highest self. I'm going to do my best, which doesn't mean perfection or even excellence all the time, but I'm going to really do my best. Once we move in that direction and we start giving of ourselves that way, the cognitive dissonance starts going away. These other noises start reducing, they diminishing, the volume gets turned down. And at the same time, what the volume gets turned up on, what feels like it's true, what feels like it's loving, what feels like it's a persistent thing that you're seeing and feeling of moving, doing this to support this health or this well-being or this person. So that's what I've experienced. Volume gets turned down in this area of noise around you, and volume gets turned up in this area of soul's calling, of what you're being guided to, of how you can be of benefit in the world, so that it's very clear. I don't ever wrestle at all with that as I'm walking around in today's world. I have challenges, I'm not saying I don't have challenges, but I don't have any like, oh, do I follow this or follow that? Mostly what I'm hearing throughout my day are these messages of how I can deploy myself, give of myself, things that I can do to extend our reach and impact into the kinds of creating this better world that I've been talking about. So now for people that are maybe still saying, well, that doesn't help me. Okay, let me just say this to you. You were guided to who you married or the partner that you have. You were guided to the home that you have. You were guided to the college that you went to. So people, all of you have been guided to certain things. And most of the time, I would contend you would say, that was good, the house, the partner, the school. So you have tuned into that voice. So it's just a matter now of making it a more consistent thing of really hearing that voice on a clearer level. And if it's loving, if it sounds truthful, if it's more persistent, these are examples of the voice and how it works. And I would just contend to really tune to that channel on a more frequent basis. And these things that have already happened to you will continue to happen, that will be taking you in this direction that you want to go.
That's brilliant, Steve. And I concur with you 100% about the two knobs. I know, like when I was under, let's say, I can't even know the exact age, it's probably between 8 and 10, I first really recognized that voice. But as I got older, it's very, like right now, I can easily distinguish, was it my father's voice? Was it the mailman's voice? Like if someone is in my head, telling me what decision I should make, who is the actual me saying it versus just these other voices from past experiences. As you get older, you're right, you can turn that volume up and for sure it's you. Just like it becomes indistinguishable to you, but you have to focus on it and work at it over time. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that. Yeah, I mean, the distinction becomes very clear, and you won't. I don't ever wonder anymore. I don't ever walk around wondering, is it this or is it that? I know, the more we tune in and follow it, the stronger it gets. And it really is a matter. One is going to keep getting turned down to where it really almost goes away, and the other one is going to just be there in a huge,
crystal clear.
Always.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you. Okay, Steve. So we're moving into our last segment here, where we're basically going to ask temple questions. I've asked everyone from Les Brown to Brett Farr, you name it, who's been on here. These are getting more into my field, finance and business and stuff like that, but a little bit sprinkled with a little bit of writing stuff. So first question is, and we figure about, these are very quick answers too, so about 10 to 20 seconds each. Can one book change the world?
You can if you let it. The book one, Conversations with God, where this whole dream of a more healthful community and world surfaced for me, and where I said, okay, I'm going to make that dream is my dream. I'm going to live my life to make that happen. It can if you let it. It's very much of an individual decision, as to whether one book is going to have that kind of impact on you or not.
Thank you, Steve. What role has networking played in your life?
It just happens so spontaneously when we're in that super conscious or supra conscious level, which means that we're supporting just real health and well-being out in the world. Wow. I mean, watch how, look how we got connected. Watch how you're just going to get connected. I don't have to work at it. Doors just open for me, because I'm not trying to do anything just for the little me. It's the bigger me, that's trying to do good. That's operative, and that's going to create connections and networking for you.
And those connections are instrumental in anyone's success if they get connect to the right people the right way.
They are. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Steve. And as an extension of that, is mentoring important? Who are some of your mentors?
Mentoring, well, for me, the one that I call the divine or God, the one that brought the dream to me, for Marine, that's the big one. So I'm tuned into that channel all day long, of what he has to say and feel and is guiding me to. So that's really been my mentor. I haven't so much had, so many people have had people that have really guided their professional, personal development. My early days, my mom and dad certainly played an influence, but I haven't had, so much that privilege. But I have had the privilege of the one that I call the divine or God, that is just there in an amazing way, that I would say mentors me.
That is the most unique response I've had so far. I like it though. It makes a lot of sense. But from a physical human perspective, would you say it would make your life a lot easier if you had a mentor in life or business, especially?
It certainly can help. Boy, when you're creating
The right mentor.
we
The
had
right
over
mentor.
100 people in the second company, going on 200 in the first one. So if you have somebody that can mentor you in business to help you, that would be huge. I had to learn all those lessons myself.
That's the alternative.
There was a guy, Noel Fenton, who did help in a number of ways. I shouldn't, just be so dismissive. He ran a venture firm there in Silicon Valley, and he would spend quality time with me. He definitely helped me.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Steve. All right, Steve, what are your favorite financial books? Maybe just 2 or 3, and I'm including money, investing, business, anything that comes to mind. Think and Grow Rich, maybe.
Yeah, 7 Habits, Stephen Covey. That was, in fact, I even taught the book within my first company. Had a huge influence on me. And gosh, yeah, it's funny. Of all of these other books,
Did you ever read Think and Grow Rich?
I'm not sure that I have. Yeah,
Napoleon Hill?
yeah. I'm not sure that I have. There's a book I read that helped me out. And gosh, I don't even remember the exact title, but it's what it said for a nonprofit is, because we raise money too, is it said, I used to think you wanted to find the right way to ask, at the end, was you raise money. And the book said, oh, don't worry about that. The only thing you want to do is just open your heart and speak the truth. Just your why, speak your why, tell them why you were here, what you were doing, and invite people to participate. And that was, wow, that was this is what I do in general, even here with you, where if we just walk around, including raising money, with just the complete honest truth of our why. This is why what I'm doing. This is what we're working on. If you want to support it, come in and support us. There's nothing more powerful than just a straight from the heart why statement.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate everything you've done. By the way, you go by Stephen or Steve?
Steve, yeah.
Steve, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Thank you, Steve. What are your do we need money to survive? Sorry. Do we need money to survive? That's our next question.
Yeah, sure. No, money's a great thing. As you know, there are many people that walk around in lack and kind of push money away and are afraid of the stock market or real estate or something. Now, I didn't grow up with that, so I never felt that. To me, money's an incredible tool, and I wouldn't be able to do all the things I'm doing if I hadn't, at an early age, created financial wealth. where I could just say, okay, I went to my wife, back in the 90s and said, I'm not sure I'm ever going to earn a paycheck again, and she said, well, okay, let's go. And here we are all these 25 years later, so yeah, no, wealth is it's such a wonderful tool. Why would we? It's just that we don't, what we've done here is, the American dream, it's the ladders, the first ladders there on the American dream are wonderful, equal opportunity and education for all. Want that for the whole planet. The problem is we kept climbing to the higher rungs on the ladder, and in the higher rungs, it's more power, fame, and fortune, that a lot of young people seek. And that's where, you're just never going to find true happiness with where you're pursuing those things. That's not the way to really live a great life. And, again, my duration in Silicon Valley really taught me that it's more this conscious living route where we can live anywhere in the world, where we can create that happiness, not trying to pursue power, fame, and fortune.
Thanks, Steve. And as an extension of that, is finance necessary for everyone? Now, this is the science of finance, the management of this money, management of other wealth. Is that necessary for people to learn about this stuff so they can manage their own money better and stuff like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So as an example, one of the things Warren Buffett shares all the time is everybody wants to go and rely on a financial consultant or something to perform this function for you. What a disaster. It's not that hard to learn the tools of money management, the discipline and the tools of money management. And then you have complete freedom and complete control over your life. And it's not that hard to learn, where the formulas and the percentages and things. I often hear people say, so coming up on retirement, well, I need to go meet with a financial analyst to decide if I can retire. And I think, oh my gosh, I would not want to, you can't give your power away. And if you do, it's going to be expensive, and I'm not sure they're going to lead you where you want to go.
That's true. I actually came out of the gate from GW. My first job was for the largest investment company in the world called Vanguard. And get this, my job was a retirement specialist. So I got to talk for all day long to probably 50 to 100 people managing their money. And here's the interesting thing, like people that retired, you wouldn't hear from them 6 months later. They usually die. Like and I know it's sad.
Yeah.
I learned this early on in my early 20s. Like if you retire and you just stop doing the traditional retirement, you're losing. And I figured this out later is because they didn't have a purpose to live anymore. You can't keep going just on, showing up and fishing every day or standing and staring at your wall, watching TV. You're going to fall apart.
This is going at my premise, we're designed this way as part of the one, exactly what you're saying. So what that means is if we retire and just want to hang up our boots and we don't have any more reason for being, you're going to be, your soul is going to decide, I'm out of here. You're not going to live, a long, healthy, happy life.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. All right, Steve, we only got three more questions left and we're done. How important is having a purpose in business, and what is your purpose?
Oh gosh, it's everything. And what I've been contending here is if it's just the top line and bottom line, that's the purpose. That old, I'll call it conventional way of business, we can see it's dying. It's just dying right now. The millennials, the alpha generation, Z generation, alpha, they don't want to do it, and even my generation, the boomers, coming out of COVID, we're hearing the stories. The money alone won't do it. They're quitting jobs. They're looking for something with greater purpose. So this is the big thing actually right now. The huge thing is mission and purpose, deeper meaning, how can I find it? Where can I find it? And as for me, it's the things that I'm talking about. I want to live, be my best self, my highest self that can, for my family, for the community, for the world, and just at the end of my life, feel like, wow, I made a difference. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't excellent all the time, but I sure did my best. And maybe I can even help untangle and figure out, this whole journey to this sustainable, flourishing planet for humankind. And it's like, wow, now, if I can even be a little part of that puzzle piece that snaps that together, that's going to be a life well lived. That's my mission.
Thank you, Steve. Beautiful response. What would you like to accomplish in the next 10 years or so, and why?
Next 10 years is we're in the middle of this great shift right now. This shift of the ages, this pivot to this whole new way of living. I say in the middle of, because things like life on other planets, what we call UFOs, are becoming common. We're saying, yeah, probably. Energy, by this notion that we're energetic beings, spiritual beings. There's more and more, yes, probably true. And that if we make that our practice, we can even go up into healer, we're healers like John of God and these others that are on the planet. Yeah, probably so. So out in the open, and then even this whole, I've been bringing in NDEs, near-death experience, and mediums, where we're lifting the veil, where we're in touch with guides, with angels, with loved ones. Again, more and more people, the University of North Texas now is going to the chronically sad that have passed to put people in touch with loved ones who have passed. It's being taught at the college level. So in many ways, this whole conscious living thing is now coming out into the open. This will be commonplace in the next 10 years. I think that what I'm calling conscious living, where you bring all of these things together and you have these new understandings, this Galileo moment, as I'm calling it, where we say, oh my God, there's new understandings, there's new science, or new things to consider in life that aren't what I grew up with when I went through my my grade school, high school, and college science. I'm going to embrace these new understandings, and I'm going to start living my life in a new way. So that's in the next 10 years, just really propelling that, giving support to that in every way I can, educating so that people really understand how ultimate reality works, so we can get our ladder against the right wall, and not the old wall that Albert Einstein talked about, where we walk around with this optical delusion of everything is separate, that's a prison for us.
Thank you, Steve. And with that said, any books, plans for new books or movies or any of that stuff too?
I kind of follow callings there. I was called to write the book. If I'm called to write another one, I will. And if there's we create videos now, even you could call them movies. There's a lot that we're working on to just get out into the public domain, to this whole conscious living thing, how the science of what it is, how it works. So I imagine probably all of that in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, did you ever see that movie Manifest? It's a series, actually. It just came out like 2 years ago or a year ago.
Oh, I'm not sure that I have. Was it like Netflix or?
I don't watch too much TV either, but this one
Yeah.
was pretty good. It was like these people were walking around, they had the voice in their head. Every time they said to do something, they would do it, and they would find out that they had to do it for some reason that they would figure out later. So
yeah, I like it.
yeah, it's a kind of a little addictive miniseries. But yeah, so last question for you. Thank you, Steve. What would you like to be your legacy to this world? Like, if you could say in one sentence, my legacy is, or can you fill in the blanks?
Yeah, he gave his best self. He really was devoted to kind of giving his best self, did his best. That would be it. I don't think so much about legacy, because that's going to happen on its own way, in its own time and in its own way. But I do think about, every day of just how can I really stay true to the calling, and every day, you're Dr. Finance, so every day is really a precious day. You've got these hours in the day, and how am I going to deploy them to maximum effect? So that's what I'm feeling into all day long, of how do I deploy my talents and gifts in a maximum way with the team that I'm working with.
Thank you, Steve. Steve, again, I want to conclude and thank you, because I'm honored to have you here, sir. I appreciate all your time, and especially going deep with a lot of these really the deepest level questions possible. I want to thank you again, and anything you'd like to add before we close out. The floor is yours, Steve.
Yeah, just call people to clear these limiting beliefs is my invitation here. Clear that there are a lot of limiting beliefs that we've been getting to as we've been going through this program, that these things of just the science we grew up in, that was just about our physical bodies, and that our limitations were all around the physical body. I just would invite you to clear the limiting beliefs. The whole ocean in a drop is real. everlasting life is real. And if you don't believe that, go read Proof of Heaven by Dr. Evan Alexander, or come to Humanities Team, our website, go through his free program, or Suzanne Giesman's free program, or Karen Noe's free program, or the Life After Death program with Wayne Dyer's kids. Spend some quality time really understanding how we lift the veil, and see the reality of other worlds. So clearing limiting beliefs is part of it, and then really living into your fullest self and helping this world around us. It needs us all. We're in the shift of the ages right now. We're going to get to the other side where future generations can enjoy this planet, and where we live into a really rich and abundant life. And we can do all of that when we live consciously, and when we clear our limiting beliefs and live consciously and stretch into the fullest capacities of what we have. So that's my invitation to all listeners.
Thank you, Steve. And where can they find out more information about yourself, your website, social media?
Yeah, so you can go to anewuniversaldream.com to read about my book, and open the first 4 chapters, and even get a free my free masterclass on conscious leadership. You can go to humanitiesteam.org to learn about all of these programs that we've got, the streaming platform, the Global Oneness Summit, our Spiritual Leadership Award, our programming that's almost every day, Humanities Team with a Y.org. And then you can go to humanitystream.net, humanitystream.net, if you want to go straight to the streaming platform and the library with all hundreds of video trainings. You can check that out there, and with a subscription platform and the 1-for-1 where we give it away, all of that is discussed there at humanitystream.net.
Thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate you. And I want to thank you again for being here. Steve, if you can wait for me in the green room, I'd love to escort you out. I want to just thank the audience for being here. Folks, Dr. Anthony Criniti IV, also known as Dr. Finance Live Dr. Finance Live podcast, also known as Dr. Finance. I'm tripping up today. Welcome anyway. These are my books. If you want to learn more about finance, you got The Necessity of Finance. I wrote that about over 10 years ago for my finance students. The Most Important Lessons in Economics and Finance, and finally, The Survival of the Richest. If you want to find out more information about this podcast or this interview or any of the other interviews, go to drfinance.info. Okay, drfinance.info. And also, folks, we'll be blasting this out to YouTube and 20 plus major podcast directories. Again, Dr. Anthony Criniti IV, also known as Dr. Finance. You've been watching the Dr. Finance Live podcast. We're going to see you soon on the next episode. Don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you got any questions, feel free to put them in the chats as well. So thanks again. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you for being here. And we'll see you all in the next episode.